confront a wave of Iranian airstrikes at Israel this morning, with air raid sirens ringing out 3 times in 1 hour in central Israel. Now, one missile did land in an open area as Iran apparently tried to target the Hadera power station, but no injuries or damage is reported in any of these strikes. Meanwhile, the 27-year-old woman who was killed in a Hezbollah rocket attack on northern Israel yesterday has been identified as Nuriel Dubin. She was a youth counselor who was about to be married. She was fatally wounded by shrapnel on Road 90 after a barrage of around 30 rockets targeted the Rosh Pina area. 2 others lightly injured in that attack. MDA medics said they found her unconscious with severe injuries and declared her dead at the scene. Separately, an Iranian missile impact in the city of Sfat lightly wounded 2 people from shard glasses. And in central Israel last night, 9 people were wounded in Bnei Brak, including a 23-year-old man in moderate condition. Others, including children and an elderly woman, were lightly injured in blasts or by additional shrapnel. Additional impacts reported in Petach Tikva, Givat Shmuel, and Rosh Ayin, causing damage, but no further injuries. Well, joining us now from out on the streets of Tel Aviv is our Devo Klein with On the Latest. And Devo, what can you tell us the latest on this latest round of air sirens?
Hey, Kalev, it's good to be with you. I'm actually standing right now at the Culture Square that's in the heart of Tel Aviv. There's a bit of movement. There are people behind me right now, but this is nothing compared to what we saw this morning. Like you said in your report earlier, we've got back-to-back sirens. It all started at around 10:50 a.m. when there were alerts also in northern Israel and also in central Israel that the Islamic regime has fired ballistic missiles. The north sirens, as you accurately reported, was in fact targeting an energy infrastructure in Hadera, that's in northern Israel. And the videos on your screen right now, there's these plumes of smoke. Those videos were going around. So the Israel Electrical Company actually came out with a message letting everybody know that no damages was caused to this critical energy infrastructure that the Islamic regime was attempting to target. The missile that was fired toward the infrastructure did fall in an open area. That's where you see the smoke coming from, so they did have to clarify that. But after central Israel had the red alert sirens at 10:50, they got another one at 11 a.m. and then another one at 11:15. So that's 3 back-to-back barrages from the Islamic regime, sending thousands into shelters. But ever since then, it has been a little bit quiet here in Tel Aviv. Obviously, everybody is staying alert and listening to the home front command guidelines because they do save lives. But as of right now, the streets are more or less bustling. There are people out, and happy to report that there has been a significant reduction in the amount of sirens hitting central Israel.
Right. We should note that that footage of the blast near Hadera release of it was approved by the IDF military censor Devo Klein out there in Culture Square in Hebima. Thank you for that, Devo.
Thank you, Kalev.
President Donald Trump says Iran has offered a, quote, very significant prize to the U.S. related somehow to oil, gas in the Strait of Hormuz. He also says a resolution to the war could be possible. Trump claiming the U.S. and Iran have held productive talks on a complete end to hostilities, the talks involving his envoy Steve Witkoff, son-in-law Jared Kushner, and other top officials. Now, some U.S. strikes on Iranian targets, including at power stations, have been postponed to at least this Friday, as these negotiations are set to continue. Trump said the talks have gone perfectly, but warned that if negotiations fail, military action will continue. Here's some of what the president had to say.
If we can end this without more lives being down, without knocking out $10 billion electric plants that are brand new and the apple of their eye, I'd like to be able to do that, you know. But they can't have certain things. I mean, you know the things. I don't have to go over the list, but again, it starts with no nuclear weapons, and they've agreed to that. There won't be any nuclear weapons. They're not going to have, and they're not going to have enrichment. Any of those things. But look, I hate to say that we're in a very good bargaining position, and I hate to say that they're defenseless because, you know, until that last missile is fired, they have little power. But we are in about the best bargaining position.
Now, for their part, Iranian officials continue to deny the existence of peace talks with the U.S. An Iranian military spokesperson says the U.S. is negotiating with itself. Addressing President Trump directly, the spokesman added, "People like us can never get along with people like you." Now, this comes a day after Trump said Tehran wants to make a deal to end the war, with reports of a 15-point plan prepared by Washington that was sent to Iran. The Iranian spokesman says U.S. investments in pre-war energy prices will not return until Washington accepts that regional stability is only guaranteed by Iranian forces. And he mocked the president with a familiar catchphrase from Trump's old TV show, The Apprentice. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Trump, you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The central headquarters of Khatam al-Anbiya. سطح خود درگیری هایتان به مرحله مذاکره خودتان با خودتان رسیده؟ نه خبری از سرمایه گذاری هایتان در منطقه خواهد بود و نه قیمت سابق انرژی و نفت را خواهید دید تا وقتی که بفهمید ثبات در منطقه توسط دست قدرتمند نیروهای مسلح ما تضمین می شود. ثبات از طریق قدرت. صراحتاً اعلام می کنیم تا موعدی که اراده ما نباشد هیچ وضعیتی به روال سابق بر نمی گردد. این اراده زمانی ایجاد می شود که به طور کامل فکر اقدام علیه ملت ایران از اذهان کثیف شما پاک شود.
Let's turn now to the northern front, where the IDF is moving to gain effective control of South Lebanon up to the Litani River. Well, overnight, the IDF struck key crossings used by Hezbollah to move weapons and operatives to the south. Now, under the 36th Division, Golani forces continued targeted ground operations to expand the IDF's forward security zone. Troops killed 8 terrorists in close combat, including a Radwan force sniper, and destroyed an underground shaft used for staging and weapon storage. Dozens of rockets, rifles, machine guns, and grenades were destroyed. The Air Force also struck fuel stations linked to Hezbollah's Al-Amana network. That's a key source of funding and logistics for the terror group. In Beirut, strikes hit Hezbollah headquarters, including that of the Radwan force, as well as intelligence units and a radio station. The government of France is urging Israel to refrain from expanding ground operations, warning it could have, quote, major humanitarian consequences. The French foreign minister also praised Lebanon for expelling Iran's ambassador and accused Hezbollah of dragging the country into a new conflict. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, insisted Israel will take control of areas in southern Lebanon as part of its security efforts. Well, joining us now for more on all of this are Professor Gerald Steinberg. He is the founder and president of the organization NGO Monitor here in Israel. And from the U.S. we have Shirvan Fashandi. He's a political analyst, and he is a board member of the group Iranian Americans for Liberty. Gerald, let me just start with you. President Trump tripling down on his insistence there are peace talks. They are moving constructively. He sees a deal possible. And you heard the reaction from the Iranian spokesman, at least publicly, also doubling down on their denial of any of this. I mean, based on what we know, what is your, just, I guess, best estimate? What actually is going on here?
We don't know anything. That's my best estimate. We hear a lot of words. There may be talks going on. I'd say probably there's some sort of talks going on, but with whom? It's maybe the Speaker of the Parliament, maybe somebody from the Revolutionary Guard Corps, maybe combination. Are they able to deliver if there are agreements going on? Of course, they're going to deny it until there's an agreement they can sell, and they can say, we've won the war, we've survived, the Americans are going to let us live, they're not going to take over Kharg Island or the Straits, and therefore we're going to call this a victory. The Israelis have been battered by all our wonderful missiles, and therefore we can reach this agreement, which we refused to reach a month ago. I think that's probably unlikely, but it's a possibility. Certainly, Iran has suffered a great deal of losses, and the regime does want to survive. At the same time, I think they can look at what's going on in the United States, the rise in the gas prices, the criticism that Trump is getting, and there are claims that Trump is playing to his audience and saying we're negotiating, we're close to an agreement. Our oil prices then immediately started to go down. So that's also a domestic win. But how that all plays out, I'll just add one other important factor, and that is thousands of American troops This is a capability. This is not just words, are on their way or have arrived in the region. And if the U.S. government, basically if Mr. Trump decides that he wants to take land areas in order to ensure navigation, in order to punish the Iranians by taking Kharg Island, which would be a huge, huge loss for them economically, then he's got the capability to do that. About 4 weeks ago, we saw massive American arms and ships coming into the area, and sure enough, he used all those weapons on the day, basically on the Saturday night, Sunday morning, when we woke up and we realized there was a war on.
Right. There are reports, as you said, of, for example, a couple of thousand of soldiers from the U.S. Paratroops Division, which is something you could imagine being used in a ground up, for example, Kharg Island. But let me go to Shuva, also basically the same question, but looking at more from the Iranian perspective. I mean, if they are talking, who do you think the U.S. is actually talking to? How sincere do you think they are? And could they deliver? And could they even come close to making the kind of compromises that you heard President Trump talking about?
Hi, good question. Basically, the way I look at it, both President Trump's statements and the IRGC spokesperson's statement could be true. I know it's hard to believe, but the regime is so fractured at this point, the Islamic Republic regime is so fractured at this point, that it is similar to like quantum physics. You know, the ones who are familiar with quantum physics know that like a statement can be true and untrue at the same time, depends on who you ask and depends on the observer. We are facing similar situation in Iran. Like, it is totally possible that some of the political or military, meaning IRGC at this point, military leaders are in talks with the United States. But at the same time, other political leaders or military leaders or both are against it and are actively trying to sabotage it. It is totally possible that the situation here, the situation in Iran is that both the political apparatus as well as the military one are fractured, and there is no central command. Let's say the Speaker of the House, Ghalibaf, who has been an IRGC officer, by the way. Let's say he's talking with the Americans at some level. It's totally possible that other IRGC officers basically eliminate him. It is at that level. So there is there is a lot of fracturing in the system, and that makes reaching an agreement with Americans, with the Arab neighbors, much more difficult than before. Also, the list of demands of the regime now, it has grown compared to like 2 months ago. 2 months ago, nobody, not Americans, nor Iranians, nor the Islamic Republic, was talking about the Strait of Hormuz. It was not on the table. The whole debate was about the nuclear enrichment and maybe missiles and all that. And they couldn't reach an agreement then. Now we have a totally new, relatively new subject on the matter on the table. Then that it may relate to the United States because it affects the energy markets, but it more directly relates to the Arab neighbors in the Persian Gulf. Because if you open the map and look at Persian Gulf, it's basically a pond. Several Arab countries, Iraq, Bahrain, Qatar, and even eastern coast of Saudi Arabia, their only access to the open seas is through Strait of Hormuz. And now Iran is talking about this international, this strait is not considered an international waterway anymore. It has been for several hundred years, by the way. And now we're going to treat it like a private canal, basically like a Panama Canal or Suez Canal. And every vehicle, every vessel, every ship basically is supposed to pay tolls to us. And that makes many Arab states effectively client states of the United States. a state without air force, without even proper navy, and now they're demanding tolls from several Arab neighbors.
Right.
That makes reaching an agreement much more difficult.
Absolutely, and maybe that's one of the reasons why, for example, we hear that the Saudi Arabia or MBS wants the war to continue against Iran. But I want to go back to Gerald to the potential of talks. We do have this what is reported to be this 15-point agreement that the U.S. is offering. Hard to imagine Iran agreeing to all those points, but there are some issues that have been raised with it. One is, of course, a lifting of all sanctions on Iran. The fact that there's no regime, it doesn't involve what you might call regime change or anything internal in terms of Iran. And also, even now there's talk of maybe there'll be a ceasefire for a month or 2 months while this deal is further negotiated, which sounds like just a return to the negotiations. The U.S. were fruitless. So I want to get your reaction to all of this.
It's part of negotiating tactics and strategy, and Trump's been doing this all his life. You dangle all sorts of things in front of your client or your partner or whatever the opposite number that's sitting across the table from you. Some of them you might be willing to do, some of which you're not interested at all, but you want to dangle them. You want to get, but it's bait. You want to get them to sit at the table. Look, Trump does have a cause, a concern. He wants to get the war over. I believe that's serious. How much more damage can be done to Iraq is not clear. So he wants to get them in the situation. And they also, I think Shuva alluded to this or stated it, that you talk to one group of Iranian officials, the other ones are shut out, and that could create friction within the ruling structure, greater friction, and that may cause them also to collapse. We're in a huge, I would say like a tornado or hurricane of uncertainty now, complete chaos. And I kind of sometimes compare this to, it's very different, but the Chernobyl reactor that blew up in Russia, and it took 3 years. It was clear right afterwards that the Russian government was in total disarray, didn't know how to handle it. There were casualties, radioactivity, possible massive explosions. It took 3 years afterwards for that to sink through the rest of the system and lead to the end of the Soviet Union. So what happens in Iran now is very much open. And I think if Trump can find a way through negotiations to lower the level of the conflict and let the events take the politics in Iran take their course, and perhaps replace the regime, that would be a desired outcome. That may be much too hopeful, much too optimistic, but that's also a possibility. So I look at the negotiation reports as within many different frameworks that are basically parallel. One specifically on the war, also with Israel, also with the Gulf states in the region. The United States wants to maintain close relations with particularly Saudi Arabia. The domestic politics in Iran and the United States, those are all part of this process. So I'm cautious in trying to sort all that out. I'm not going to make any predictions about where this is all going to go. There is a scenario that says we're going to reach some sort of a ceasefire. I think a ceasefire is on the table because both sides are exhausted. But what happens after that? How do you get the uranium out? All those other things. Iran is very good at agreeing to terms and then not implementing them. I think and I hope that Trump is aware of that. Certainly, Mr. Netanyahu will make him aware of that. So any agreement has to have a very clear implementation framework.
Well, I have to ask Shervan, I mean, Gerald's saying that, well, eventually the impact of this war could bring down the Iranian regime, but that's not explicitly mentioned in the agreement. You even have President Trump making statements, as he did just the other day, saying, well, we've kind of affected a regime change. What's the perspective from Iranians, both within Iran and those like yourself, living, working activists trying to affect change within Iran, if this war would end now with this current leadership still weakened but still in place?
True. If the hostility stops, it has definitely weakened the regime because the old supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, was killed, and his son Mujtaba is again in quantum states. He's dead and alive at the same time, similar to Schrodinger's cat. And that certainly has weakened the regime. Having said that, we can't consider this a regime change. We can barely even consider this a change in regime's behavior, because the head of three branches of government, judiciary, the executive branch, the president, as well as the speaker of the parliament, all three of them are still alive. The same people are still alive. Many military commanders were killed. Sure, that makes a big upheaval, but I don't think it is fair to say there has been a regime change or even a change in regime. I think President Trump is following three goals by these negotiations. One is to calm down the markets, the financial markets and energy market, global energy markets in the short term. That's, I think, number one objective of President Trump's administration. Two is, as discussed, because the regime is fractured, as soon as the talks of negotiations are brought up, different factions within the regime start like eliminating one another, start plotting against one another, and conspiring against one another. So the second objective is to create basically tension within different factions of the regime. And the third one is, who knows, maybe to kill time because they need to move more troops, some Marines, and that takes time. That takes several weeks. So maybe President Trump is pursuing those objectives. So in that sense, a short truce would be maybe to the United States and to the West's benefit. But what I highly doubt is, let's say a 1 month or 6 week truce is declared. Is IRGC going to respect that and allow free navigation through Strait of Hormuz without charging the vessels? I highly doubt that, because like as of a couple of weeks ago, they have started this pipe dream. The IRGC has started this pipe dream of having huge source of revenue, $50 billion a year, $80 billion a year. These are estimates that I have seen, to have that revenue from the toll collected at the Strait of Hormuz, which is comparable to the regime's revenue from oil. And are they going to let that go even temporarily, as long as they are negotiating? I highly doubt that.
Right. Gerald, I want to go back. I want to go look at the Northern Front, because we've been discussing whether or not there'll be a ceasefire with Iran, maybe a peace deal with Iran. But Israel has said is separated now its battle against Hezbollah from the Iran conflict. But how realistic do you think it is? Is it not likely there might be international pressure, even U.S. pressure, on Israel to at least pull back its military operations and allow the Lebanese government to try to work this out? Or do you think, how far do you think Israel should go in order to try to secure the northern homeland under the current circumstances?
We saw that all the other ceasefires, and I remember back in 2006 when you had Israeli politicians and French politicians and European politicians on the stage declaring a ceasefire after the 50-something day war that they had in 2006 against Hezbollah. That's not going to happen again. UN Resolution 1701 is completely useless. And I find it humorous and tragic that you have these statements by French leaders, by Macron himself, who's done absolutely nothing to implement a workable ceasefire and a workable peace framework. The Israeli public, the residents of northern Israel, need to be able to live in their houses without being constantly attacked. Therefore, Hezbollah must be dismantled. Changing that is a non-starter. And I don't see any international force. I doubt the United States would put pressure on Israel not to do that. Iran might demand it. I don't see the US going on with that. Hezbollah has to be disarmed, defeated, more than even what we saw with Hamas, where we're still waiting for international processes to disarm Hamas, but they're severely weakened. Hezbollah has to be disarmed. The tunnels have to be blown up. The missiles have to be destroyed. We have Israeli ground troops are there. There's some pressure on the Lebanese government, which is of course extremely weak and unable to implement any of its promises, that if there's no framework for dismantling Hezbollah, Israeli forces will stay in southern Lebanon for a significant period of time. It didn't work out so well back in 2000, but I think now there's a much more determined and strategic framework in which to do that. So Lebanon is in play, and I don't see this ending without very, very fundamental disarmament of Hezbollah. They will continue probably to exist. They're a significant part of the Shiite population in Lebanon. They will continue to exist as what they call a political movement, but their military capabilities will greatly, greatly be degraded, and Israel has to insist on that. It's also, by the way, one other point about a ceasefire with Iran. If the Iranians, IRGC, still maintains 120, 140 launchers out of the original 800, that still can do considerable damage. And Israel doesn't want to be in a situation where every time somebody in Tehran decides to push the button and launch another missile at Israel, people go scattering to the shelters. So I don't see that a ceasefire with that capability being maintained as a stable result of the process, maybe temporarily with very strict limitations. But Israel will continue to hunt down and blow up the remaining 140 launchers that we say exist.
Right. And Shuva, how realistic is it? I mean, it is part of this plan the U.S. has put forward, supposedly, that Iran will stop supporting, funding, arming its regional proxies, most prominently Hezbollah. You could add the Houthis, the Shiite militias in Iraq, etc. to that. How realistic that the IRGC would even go along with that, given how much is invested in trying to create this, what we call this Shiite crescent across the region?
That possibility is less than zero. Like less than zero.
Well, yes. Then you need quantum physics for that. Less than zero.
Yeah.
Negative.
Honestly, especially all of the Shia axis, especially Hezbollah, is so intertwined with the Islamic Republic ideology and personnel and history that it's impossible for the regime to let go of that. Like, as soon as there's an uprising in Iran, and they need to massacre another tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands people, they have done that before, they will bring basically machine gun operators from Lebanon and Iraq. They'll fly them to massacre people. So they need them for that. And they're like ideologically intertwined. If you recall, before Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, was killed a year and a half ago, for a while there was a talk that the next supreme leader could be Nasrallah, even though he's not even Iranian. He did speak Persian with heavy and thick accents, so he was not Iranian. His first language was not Persian. Still, he was at least being considered for the role of supreme leader. That shows how intertwined Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic in Iran. We can barely call it Islamic Republic of Iran. We can call it Islamic Republic in Iran. How intertwined they are, because the way the regime, the Islamic Republic regime, sees itself is not like a government to run Iran. They see themselves as Shia International. Remember, in the time of Soviet Union, we had like Socialist International. These guys see themselves as Shia International. And the headquarters may be in Tehran, solely because Iran is the largest, most populous Shia state, but they don't think in terms of national interest. They think in terms of Shia International axis of resistance, etc., etc.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think to stay on the quantum physics theme, we're living with an uncertainty principle right now for certain, and we'll have to see if maybe the next few days, certainly after Friday, whether the situation and the stance of the U.S. and President Trump somewhat clarifies. Shirvan Fashandi of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, and of course Gerald Steinberg and Professor Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor. Thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thanks, Kalev. Good to talk to you.
Now, as we have been reporting and have you just heard discussing, the situation on the home front has been particularly challenging in northern Israel, which is being battered by missile attacks launched by Hezbollah from southern Lebanon. And this week, unfortunately, did see fatalities in the north. As we said yesterday, 27-year-old Nuriel Durbin killed by a Hezbollah rocket out on the roads. And earlier, 60-year-old Ofer Moskovitz of Kibbutz Mizgavam, who tragically died as a result of a IDF artillery misfire. Well, joining us now from the north is Mizgav resident Hanan Rubinsky. Hanan, thank you for joining us. Maybe since I know the funeral of Ofer Moskowitz was just yesterday, and people have said this was someone who was almost like a legendary figure on the kibbutz. Talk a little about what it's meant for the kibbutz to lose him and what the situation is there for you in general.
Well, Ofer Moskowitz, Poshko, as we called him, was a friend of many people. The fact that he was a friend of many people was because he was a very cheerful person. He was a very optimistic person. And in a small community like Kibbutz Mizgav, he was very well noticed. And also all over the Upper Galilee, he used to broadcast in our local radio, and he worked in the our avocado, and many people. For example, today we have in our broadcast station in the Upper Galilee, they are bringing songs, and people are talking about him. And it started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it will be until the evening. So you can understand how well he was known, how well he was loved. And for us, as a small community, he was, like I said, he was if we were sad, if we weren't, if we saw that nothing bad can go on further, he was the optimistic. He was the one that says, it will be okay, we'll survive it, we'll manage. And now he's gone, and we are broken.
Really, may his memory be a blessing, and that, of course, also of Nuriel Durbin, who was killed yesterday. Let me ask you, people see, especially abroad, these scenes of people going into shelters in central Israel, where, especially when the rockets from Iran, you have a good minute or two to get in you don't have that luxury in the north. 15, 20 seconds before from a siren until that rocket hits. What is it like for you and all your neighbors up there dealing with that kind of situation?
First of all, I want you to understand, I'm making this interview not from Mizgav. I'm making this interview from Kibbutz Gadot, because after 3.5 weeks of unstopping fire and rockets, from both sides, I had to take my children and my grandchildren especially to a shelter, to a place that they can go outside and not be locked in home all day long. This is the first thing, and I think that when you understand it, you understand what is the gravity of the situation in Mizgav. Now, we don't have. You are mistaken about in the information that you got. We don't have 5 seconds, 10 seconds. We don't have nothing. We hear the bomb. Yeah, we hear the bomb, and after that the siren goes on. That's the alarm that we have. Now, what's more? That's in Mizgav. If you go further inside the valley, you have a couple of seconds. That's right. If you're talking about a launch from Iran, you have 10 seconds. But we don't have nothing, and more serious than that, we don't have shelters. We have shelters like a big shelter in the kibbutz, but every house doesn't have its. Just a moment, my grandchild is crying. Okay, just a moment. Anyway, we don't have shelters that we can that we can go inside in our home. Like we have shelters inside the kibbutz. I'm sorry that she's in the camera. We have shelters in the kibbutz, but we don't have shelters next to our house. Only new buildings in Israel have those kind of what we call mamad, if you know the term.
Of course, you're protected. Your safe room, we say, or protected room,
Yeah.
safe room in English.
So what I meant to say that we don't have safe rooms in the kibbutz, and this is a disgrace for the government of Israel that we don't have it. We always say maybe next time we'll have it, but I'm not very optimistic about that.
Right. I should note, I guess that is your grandchild you're with, holding in your arms, which is maybe it's it's a little shaky.
Yeah.
Well, that is nice. Of course, very difficult with children in these circumstances. So you said the government.
One is sleeping in the bed, and she woke up.
Okay, well, that is understandable. Now, as you said, you feel the government should have done more to provide safe rooms in the houses of the people up north. What about the current operation? What's going on in Lebanon? Because, of course, time and again, we've seen these operations in Lebanon aiming to clear out the south, but international pressure, other concerns have led them to falling short of achieving the goal, clearly, of disarming Hezbollah, as was agreed last year.
No, you're right. Look, I live in Misgava. I was born in Haifa, and I came to Misgava in 1979, something like that. Ever since I'm here, and we had the first Lebanese war, the second Lebanese war, all kind of operations. We had a couple of years of quiet. And always something happened that caused. It's not because Israel started something. It's something happened that made the other side to launch another attack, to launch another operation, and that's it's very hard to live in this kind of situation. But we are a very strong community, and we're still here, and we'll be here. I hope that maybe only a diplomatic solution will take the situation to another place. I'm not very optimistic also about that, but you can't. It's a problem that you can't break the terror of the nation that has the support of Iran until just a moment. Forgive me just a moment.
I'm sorry. Is there a siren there?
No, the siren is the baby crying.
Okay.
As I said, I just finished what I wanted to say. As I said, look, Hezbollah and Hamas are the proxies of Iran. I'm not a political. I don't deal in politics, and I don't understand much about it. But it's true. It's obvious that without cutting the head of the snake, we won't be able to come to a piece of time, to quiet times.
All right. Well, we certainly hope for quieter times for you, for your family. Is that a granddaughter or a grandson with you?
A granddaughter.
Granddaughter.
Is named Lily.
All right. Well, we certainly. I'm just going to end by saying I really hope she grows up. She has the chance to grow up in a north which does not have rockets and missiles coming down on it and having sirens constantly that she has to spend a fair part of her childhood in shelters and safe rooms or even out in the open. We wish you and all of the residents of northern Israel all our best. Hanan Rubinsky, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Now, there have been all kinds of interesting stories that have come out of the war with Iran, and here is one of the, I think, stranger ones, but also one of the more disturbing ones. Now, Polymarket is the name of an online betting platform in which millions of dollars are wagered every day on virtually everything. A lot of it really harmless stuff, but that includes also on the war with Iran. In fact, there have been several very big bets made on events connected with the war, and some of them are very suspicious in their timing. Well, last month, Israeli authorities actually arrested two individuals who had some connections with the security establishment that it said were making bets on Polymarket based on inside information relating to military activities. In another instance, a defense correspondent for the Times of Israel news site said he was threatened by Polymarket gamblers after his reporting contradicted one of the wagers that they had made about the war. And the timing just this week of betting on a possible peace deal with Iran in the millions again suggests that perhaps inside information is being used. Well, joining us now for more is Dror Globerman. He is the founder of Jumpstart AI, also a public speaker. Dror, thanks for joining us. I think I myself had never even heard of Polymarket before the war. I'm not a gambler and a bettor. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are not. Just maybe explain just exactly how this thing works and how big it is.
For having me. Polymarket, Kalshi, and a bunch of other websites actually allow users to bet on actual events. And those events could come from the political or defense, military arenas, but also from sports and culture and celebrities. Would Taylor Swift become pregnant until whatever date, or would someone win the Oscars? Which basketball team wins whatever title you choose? All of those events can be bets can be placed upon them, and not unless interestingly, this can be done anonymously. And this, of course, incentivizes lots of people to place bets without they think nobody knows who they are. And that, of course, incentivizes in its turn the use of inside information, because people believe that nobody going to know.
Right. And Dror, as you said, people can make their bets anonymously. If I'm correct, the money is actually paid through Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. Polymarket is based outside the U.S., so it's very hard to regulate. Or is there any way that this could be or should be regulated or should be done to prevent people like those two Israelis? I mean, we don't know their names, but the authorities released that two Israelis were able to make bets because they had some inside information relating somehow to security or military activities.
Yeah, so if we start with this story, then those two Israelis, one of them was serving as a reserve soldier, apparently placed, if I'm not mistaken, around $150,000 on 4 different bets regarding the war that took place in last June between Israel and Iran. And they won all 4. And this, of course, whenever you see a winning spree that is beyond regular statistics, that should make someone curious. And apparently these people had this kind of internal information. And in fact, since anyone can bet on anything, then you could sometimes view this as a game, a way to pass on some time, perhaps make some money. But people sometimes tend to observe this as just another form of gambling, which could be sometimes viewed as harmless type of play. But in this form, or under those kind of stories, we understand that this actually could be a way to give to the other side some information. Because if the Iranian, in this example, would have followed the right username, which is, by the way, easily done publicly, they could have understood some things. And if they identify who are the users that are constantly betting and winning on certain aspects, then you could follow those users and maybe gain some valuable information. Regarding regulation, which is, of course, what everyone must ask now, then this right now is not really affected by any meaningful global regulation. US, maybe a little surprisingly, is actually walking towards making this legal as possible, with the active support of President Donald Trump.
Why is that? Why would you make something like this legal when, just as you said, there are all kinds of security risks involved? Even if you don't know who's making the bet, if Iran sees heavy betting suggesting that there's going to be a surprise Israeli airstrike on Tehran, if I'm an Iranian, I'm going to suspect if it's millions of dollars, somebody knows something. So why would can you answer that?
By the way, when President Maduro of Venezuela was taken by U.S. forces, there were respective bets placed on this kind of military action.
Prior to that happening.
Yeah, a few hours prior to that happening, somebody made ton of money. Well, on the economic perception, you could say that this is just another way to make the market more transparent and maybe reflect more thoughts on views of people on what is about to happen, and allow other people to gain insights into economic events. Maybe a better way to explain President Trump's interest is the fact that his son is publicly involved in both of those large companies, Kalshi and Polymarket.
Donald Trump Jr. You're referring to Donald Trump Jr., I gather.
Yes.
Okay, well,
he holds positions in both those companies.
I see. Now, I mentioned another disturbing aspect of it, the story of this correspondent of the Times of Israel, Manuel Fabian, who was threatened because one of his reports about a strike by an Iranian rocket landing, which wasn't reported initially by the army, contradicted a bet that had been made. And he received serious threats, which suggest even that maybe perhaps criminal elements are utilizing this platform as they have in other gambling platforms and other parts of the dark web. I mean, is that not another way of trying, even a more dangerous way of trying to influence events so that people can gain profit? I would say here illegally.
Yeah. So I admit that at first I thought that having people in positions of power. Yeah, having people in the position of power, political power, be affected and perhaps even gain profits themselves through inciting such type of gambling on future actions isn't that dangerous and frightening and chaotic enough? Then here comes the story of Rafael Fabian, a reporter of Times of Israel, which really brought me some chills. And the story is he actually reported the truth about a specific Iranian missile who hit outside Bet Shemesh, didn't cause any harm, but it definitely hit the ground and exploded. And he was first pressed by individuals he did not know to alter his reporting, and then threatened violently, I mean, through texts, but then threatens for his life in the most violent way possible. We will kill you. We will destroy you. We will put hundreds of thousands of dollars into destroying you personally. All in the purpose of making him change his report that will change the outcome of one of their bets and possibly make them tons of money. And I think this is a very frightening peek into the future, where changing truth and changing future events or the report.
I don't want it to be alarmist, but doesn't such suggest, for example, somebody could say, gamble, a criminal element or even a terror group could say, I bet there's going to be a terror attack on this and that day, and then carry out such an attack, and then not only carry out the attack, but actually then profit from it.
Yes. So we actually saw such bets placed on the head of Ali Khamenei. And after his death or killing, Polymarket announced that they were no longer allowed to place any bets on someone's life or death, exactly in this purpose. Let's leave Mr. Khamenei alone. Placing bets on such events in large amounts of money would definitely create a good reason to cause them. And I don't see a way to turn this around unless global empires are able to put some global restrictions on such websites.
Global restrictions. Is there something more, particularly Israel as a country that has to be particularly sensitive to this kind of thing? Is there something more? You mentioned these two people who were arrested. Is there something more Israel could do in a more preventive manner to I don't know, could it ban, would it polymarket from local web sites or servers? Is that something, would that help?
Yeah, definitely. It should definitely happen. By the way, there is no restriction on Israelis from using this website. I saw some legal analysis saying it won't be considered as legal, but there isn't any law in place, nor has the court say its final word yet. I do think that I mean, if we think about an Israeli secret attack on Iran, right? Like the one we saw 4 weeks ago. There are probably some hundreds of people involved. You only need one, like this reserve soldier, one that would say, why won't I make a few hundreds of thousands of dollars from this knowledge I just gained and nobody else knows? So I guess this is the reason why the Israeli security is trying to make this story, to publish the story, so everyone will know. You cannot hide under this anonymity. We will get to you. But this is definitely far from being enough.
All right. Well, it's a brave new world, and unfortunately, this sounds like one of the definitely more frightening possibilities that have been opened by this new online world. Dror Globerman, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you.
Well, let's now move to the UK, where police in London have arrested two suspects in connection with the burning early Monday morning of 4 ambulances of the Hatzalah Medical Rescue Services that was done in the largely Jewish North London neighborhood of Golders Green. Now, police say, you see that it was captured there on CCTV footage. Police say the incident is being treated as a hate crime and being handled by the police's anti-terror squad. Now, this arson attack comes amid a tide of rising anti-Israel incitement and anti-Semitic incidents in the UK, as well as a wave of attacks on Jewish property and sites across Europe in recent weeks, perhaps suggesting these may not be isolated incidents. Well, joining us now for more from the UK is Johnny Gould. He is the host of the podcast Johnny Gould's Jewish State. And Johnny, what about these arrests? What do you know? And reactions? Is this something that's reassuring the Jewish community, or just generally raises more questions about how this kind of thing is going on anyway?
Yeah, as you say, hey, it's always good to speak to you. Listen, it's a terrible day again for the Jewish community in London. 2 men, aged 45 and 47, have been arrested in early morning raids. One in northwest London, presumably not far from the ambulance incident, and another in central London, just where we look more closely at the suspects. There were 3 of them, of course, which means at least one is at large. I'm wondering whether, in fact, 3 are at large, just because do they look like the silhouettes of 45 and 47-year-old men? This is the question. They look like younger men. I'm not clear on who's been arrested this morning, whether they are the ringleaders or the actual perpetrators of this terrible crime. But it has really struck home to the Jewish community. I've been on other media channels actually arguing that it's now time for guns to be licensed to our security outside synagogues and Jewish schools, because in Britain we don't have that tradition of guns on the streets. Our police don't patrol with guns like they do perhaps in the United States, and of course in Israel. It is an unusual situation, though, and the Jewish community is very, very vulnerable indeed. And Rabbi Leo D, of course, a British Jew who made Aliyah and lost his family on the roads of Judea and Samaria to a Hamas attack, came back to Britain and observed that we were, as he called us, sitting ducks. And I think that this was demonstrated with this indiscriminate attack on Jewish property. I mean, what next? It's such a disturbing moment for the British Jewish community.
Right. And let's talk about the general atmosphere in London. Of course, you have these kind of attacks, which people are now wondering if they may not be part of even an Iranian-directed wave of such attacks across Europe. But even if not, just they're taking place against this atmosphere of incitement certainly against Israel, but also being directed against the Jewish community. So talk about the background to these attacks.
Yeah, there was an early expression of responsibility by an organization with one of those elaborate Arab names when you translate it into English with something to do with a hand. It is part of the war. These aren't isolated. These aren't lone wolf. This is a continuing perpetration of the Iranian octopus all over the world. This is its proxies, its individuals, its supporters. They're on the streets. We can see them in the hate marches. Since the Gaza war has been quelled to a certain extent, the hate marches continue, this time with overt support for Iran. And what do the police do? Not a great deal, because it's rather difficult, I think, for them to police them with all the kind of regulations and laws that seem to deflect them. However, they are a law and order issue, and the police should take more action. I mean, the situation now is that the Jews are under attack all the time. It's fresh in our mind, the Yom Kippur attack on Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester. I mean, it's just getting worse and worse, and security needs to be upped. But more than that, the government needs to not just say anti-Semitism doesn't have a place in British society, but I would say anti-Zionism also has no place in British society. And that's something they're not quick to say because, of course, the incumbent Labour government rely on the Muslim vote.
Right, and maybe let's look. We have about less than a minute. The role of, for example, the mayor of London, his reaction to these events.
I'm still kind of waiting for them. So that's just as well. We haven't got much time because I could probably put them into a small place. They sort of say things like, where West Streeting has been out for the government, the health secretary, who said he would donate the money towards replacing the ambulances. But of course, the Jewish community has raised over £1 million, $1.4 million in the meantime, because that's what Jews do. We're good at charity. We're good at tzedakah. We're good at supporting each other. Sadiq Khan's not said much. He tacitly supports the hate marches. He hasn't stopped them. He could stop them. He is the police chief as well as the mayor in this city.
All right. Well, hopefully those voices like yours and others will get some kind of response, but we'll just have to see going forward. Johnny Gould, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Pleasure.
And that is a wrap for today's news. Of course, for the latest updates from Israel, you can get on all your devices. And be sure also to follow our ILTV channels. You can keep up with us on all our social media platforms, ILTV-Israel. You can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news from the heart of Israel. I'm Khaled Ben David for ILTV. Thank you so much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast, President Trump seeks to make a deal with the Iranian regime. 100-kilogram warhead hits central Israel in ballistic missile attack from Iran. After 30 missile barrage on the north, IDF strikes key targets in Lebanon. Welcome back to ILTV News. The war against the Islamic Republic continues as the U.S. and Israel continue striking targets inside Iran. Meanwhile, the regime fired 6 salvos of ballistic missiles at central Israel in the early morning, which had several sites of impact, including central Tel Aviv, where a 100-kilogram warhead struck, injuring 6 people. On the northern front, a morning barrage of 30 missiles were fired by Hezbollah. In Washington, however, President Trump appears to be turning in a different direction. Devo Klein from ILTV has the latest.
President Trump is signaling he wants a deal with Iran as the conflict continues, claiming to have had, quote, productive discussions. Even as strikes continue, the U.S. has given a 5-day window to test whether talks can move forward that would guarantee limits on the missile program, limit regional influence to the proxy terror groups, and end the regime's nuclear program. But there are conflicting signals. The regime is publicly denying that any talks are underway and rejecting reports of direct or indirect negotiations. Last night, Speaker of the Iranian parliament and a former IRGC commander, Mohammad Ghalibaf, who is rumored to be speaking with the White House, rejected the notion of speaking with the U.S. and affirmed his support for the regime. At the same time, multiple reports indicate back-channel efforts that are in motion. Pakistan is now emerging as a possible mediator, with discussions reportedly being organized there along with involvement from other regional actors. Officials say the regime's leadership is fractured, which is complicating any diplomatic track and raising questions about whether any agreement could be reliably implemented. Israel has made clear it will continue operations against the Islamic regime targets and will not rely on diplomacy alone to address the threat.
מוקדם יותר היום שוחחתי עם ידידנו הנשיא טראמפ. הנשיא טראמפ מאמין שיש סיכוי למנף את ההישגים הכבירים של צה"ל וצבא ארצות הברית כדי לממש את יעדי המלחמה בהסכם. הסכם שישמור על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו. במקביל, אנחנו ממשיכים לתקוף גם באיראן וגם בלבנון. אנחנו קודשים את תוכנית הטילים ותוכנית הגרעין עד דק וממשיכים לפגוע קשות בחיזבאללה. רק לפני ימים אחדים חיסלנו עוד 2 מדעני גרעין והיד עוד נטויה. אנחנו נשמור על האינטרסים החיוניים שלנו בכל מצב.
For now, the situation remains fluid. The U.S. is testing a diplomatic option, but with the regime denying talks, even as mediation efforts are proceeding, the outcome remains uncertain.
It's day 25 of the war against the regime in Iran. Despite President Trump signaling that the conflict may soon be over, Israel is continuing to strike targets in Iran with waves of ongoing airstrikes. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
In fresh waves of ongoing airstrikes, the IDF struck the central security headquarters of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Tehran, embedded within civilian infrastructure. The facility coordinated regional units enforcing regime order and internal security, including the Basij paramilitary force. Precise measures were taken to minimize civilian harm. Dozens of Air Force jets dropped more than 100 bombs on headquarters security bases and key weapons production sites. These include Quds Force Unit Base for coordinating IRGC operations and intelligence, IRGC Air Defense Headquarters, IRGC Ground Forces Headquarters in central Tehran, Quds Force Intelligence Headquarters, and a Naval Cruise Missile production site. After 3.5 weeks of airstrikes, the IDF says it's destroyed or rendered inoperable about 330 of Iran's estimated 470 ballistic missile launchers, targeting entrances to subterranean facilities and disabling the majority. The remaining 150 launchers are being tracked to reduce missile fire on Israel. Iranian missile strikes have dropped from about 10 per day from 90 at the start of the war. As U.S. President Donald Trump appears to be pivoting from military action to diplomacy, officials in Jerusalem insist they were not caught off guard. But concerns are being raised by some that for the 3rd time in a year, as was the case in Gaza and Lebanon, Trump is seen as seeking a deal before Israel believes its military objectives have been fully met. The shift is fueling speculation that a diplomatic exit could leave core threats intact, including Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and support for proxies like Hezbollah and Hamas. Analysts note Trump's pattern of quick deals to exit conflicts, including a previous U.S. agreement with the Houthis that left Israel exposed.
Central Tel Aviv was hit this morning by a 100-kilogram Iranian missile. Buildings were damaged and cars destroyed. The Iranian barrage hit central Israel, and a missile carrying that 100-kilogram warhead struck a street in central Tel Aviv, causing extensive damage to 3 buildings, and nearby vehicles were destroyed. Buildings also sustained heavy damage. 6 were lightly wounded in the attack, and 4 were treated for mild smoke inhalation. They did not require hospitalization. Additional damage was reported in Shuva Aim. This is the 6th Iranian barrage since midnight, continuing the ongoing threat to central Israel. Standing by at the scene right now is ILTV's Alec Pollard. Alec, what can you tell us?
Right, Emily. So I'm here at the site where the missile struck in northern Tel Aviv. And very lucky indeed that there were only 4 people who were lightly injured, no hospitalization from this attack that left a huge crater, it should be said, in the ground. You can't see it. It's behind this construction over here, and they're filling it out. They've been at work here all day in order to fix the damage to the buildings. We see the vehicles over here clearing out the debris. And it was also very lucky that the people who were in this vicinity were all in the shelter. They went into the bomb shelter, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have any casualties from this event. I spoke to some people here who live in this area. They said they heard a tremendous explosion, the loudest explosion that they heard so far. And all of that was caused by an Iranian missile, an Iranian ballistic missile with just an 100-kilo warhead. Okay, which is considered relatively small. This wasn't one of the cluster bombs that we've talked about, and this wasn't a huge payload. It was a relatively basic missile with an 100-kilo payload that caused this kind of destruction over here, that the interceptors failed to intercept it and hit here in northern Tel Aviv. But the people here persevering, and no serious casualties, just those light injuries, as you mentioned earlier.
All right, well, thank you for that update, Alec. Please stay safe out there. Israel targeted a key member of the IRGC's Al-Quds force involved in directing Hezbollah in the heart of Beirut. 7 areas of Beirut's southern suburbs were struck overnight as the IDF continues its war on Hezbollah from the air and on the ground. ILTV's Devil Klein has the latest.
The Air Force staged multiple waves of airstrikes on several neighborhoods in Beirut. Last night, the IDF issued an evacuation warning for Beirut's southern suburbs before targeting a Hezbollah stronghold. The IDF says the strike targeted a key member of Iran's Quds force operating in the Lebanese capital. The strike was reportedly in a residential Christian neighborhood near the presidential palace and hosts several foreign embassies. Meanwhile, IDF ground forces continue operations in southern Lebanon, where troops from the Givati Brigade arrested Hezbollah Radwan force operatives who were preparing an anti-tank attack. The suspects surrendered after being identified, with forces seizing weapons and destroying the positions they were using. Initial questioning indicates the operatives arrived from the Bekaa Valley earlier in the war, in what the IDF says is further evidence that the Lebanese army has failed to prevent Hezbollah activity south of the Litani River.
Joining us now to discuss Israel's strategy moving forward in Iran following President Trump's recent statements is the former head of National Security Council, Major General Yaakov Amidror. Major General, thank you so much for joining us today on ILTV. Now, we heard President Trump's comments in the last few days, specifically about negotiations, but this is happening while strikes are continuing, more military assets are being moved to the Middle East, and there's even been discussion of limited ground troops from the United States. So how serious is President Trump about a deal?
I think the situation is parallel to the situation before the war, during which the Americans had negotiations with the Iranians. It was very serious. But at the same time, they prepared the alternative. They prepared the alternative for 2 reasons. One, to show the Iranians as part of the negotiation. It's a tool in the negotiation. Guys, we are ready to negotiate, but we are preparing the alternative, and you have to understand what the alternative is. And the second reason for preparing the forces, it's if something bad happens and the negotiations fail and they have to make a decision. So they want to have all the tools ready for a decision of the war. That happened before this 24 days, and it is happening today. The Americans are bringing more forces. The Marine will be here towards the beginning of next week. More capabilities are moving into CENTCOM. And the Americans are ready to intensify the war. But at the same time, they are ready to negotiate. They have some red lines that if it be met by the Iranians, it would be an agreement. By the way, Israel should be for a good agreement. But a good agreement, the meaning of a good agreement is that the Iranians are not continuing not the missile project and for sure not the nuclear project, and all the enriched uranium is getting out of Iran. So I think that this is the policy of the president. We saw it before the war and we will see it now.
Well, based on what seems to be somewhat of a broken chain of command inside of Iran, who is there to even negotiate with? I mean, how does the United States know that any deal that is made is even enforceable?
It's not just that, it is who knows the real picture in Iran? Who is the guy or the group of people that have all the information to understand how severe is the damage to the Iranians' capabilities? I'm not sure that there is such group of people or someone who has it. It's a good question what you ask, but at the end, if an agreement will be reached, the Iranians will have to show that they are implementing it. Otherwise, the war will be resumed by the Americans and by us. I think that in spite of the fact that they have a very problematic chain of command, those which still remain, a decision can be taken. At the end of the day, a decision can be taken and it will be fulfilled. But anyhow, the test is in the pudding. Let's see what will happen.
Now, how does Israel view the prospect of a deal, and will it impact achieving our military objectives inside of Iran? I mean, we heard Prime Minister Netanyahu's comments yesterday. What is Israel's approach to this?
Look, in principle, good agreement is good for Israel. That was our policy from the beginning. The problem with the agreement that Obama reached, what is a very bad agreement. But a good agreement is good for Israel. And after what was achieved in Iran during the more than 3 weeks of the war, Iran is much weaker than it was before the war. We probably succeeded to destroy the majority of their nuclear project. Most of the target had been destroyed. It is true about the missile project that they have very advanced during the years and so on and so forth. And the whole industrial base of Iran is much more weaker today than it was before the war, because slowly, every day, 500 aeroplanes are flying from the American side of the coalition and the Israeli side of the coalition, bombing in Iran, and it is making Iran weaker every day. We don't see it from here because there is a kind of no internet, no communication, and we don't have pictures from Iran, and the details that provided by the Israelis and the Americans are very limited. But think about the fact that every day, 500 airplanes, all of them American-made, by the way, but different pilots, Israelis and Americans, are flying into Iran, bombing in Iran, and coming back from Iran every day.
It is truly remarkable what we've achieved already in only 3 weeks. But as the last question, I do want to ask you, do you expect that a deal could be made that meets the demands of the United States? I mean, they're demanding, as you mentioned, no enrichment, almost no missiles, even limiting their regional proxy power. If there was a proper chain of command, it seems these aren't demands, at least so far, that anyone within the Islamic regime would accept, no?
I don't know. The Americans had fantastic card when they began the negotiation under President Obama, and they missed the opportunity during the dialogue with the Iranians. The negotiators of the American side made very bad job. Can it happen again? I hope not, but I don't know. This is something that we will have to see during the negotiations. So we have an experience with very bad negotiators under another president. I hope that those negotiators under this president will be much better and will achieve what's supposed to be a good agreement.
All right. Well, I do want to thank you for joining us. We'll certainly be following this story as, we also have reports today about the talks in Pakistan. We're told that Jared Kushner as well as Steve Witkoff, Envoy Steve Witkoff, will be attending those talks. So more to report on that. But thank you so much for joining us, Major General Yaakov Amidror.
Thank you very much.
Moving now to the south, where a community in Arad suffered severe damages after an Islamic regime's ballistic missile struck a residential block. The community living in that area identifies as Hasidic Gur, an ultra-Orthodox sect that engages in humility and quiet living, showing that even the simplest of communities can be targeted in this ongoing war, and highlighting that even they need our help to rebuild. Sarah Friedman of the World Jewish Congress was on the ground. Take a look.
We are here in the southern Israeli city of Arad, a quiet desert community that just days ago was shattered by the reality of war. On Saturday night, Iranian ballistic missiles struck directly into a civilian neighborhood here, hitting homes and leaving dozens wounded. Many of them children, as entire residential buildings were torn apart in an instant. This is not just any neighborhood. The areas struck were homes to members of the Gur Hasidic community, a close-knit, deeply rooted sect within the ultra-Orthodox world, where life revolves around faith, family, and unshakable sense of communal responsibility. I myself come from this group. There are families who built their lives and routine around prayer, around raising children in safety and tradition, and in a single moment, that sense of security was ripped away. We are here with those families, listening to their stories, witnessing their resilience, and standing with a community now forced to navigate trauma while holding on to faith.
Most of the people that live in the community are innocent citizens who work hard for their living, families with a lot of children, and everything just ended in 1 second. Now they're left with nothing. They're left with no house, no furniture, no clothes, no games, no books, no money. They have nothing. They can't work because and then we've got Pesach next week, and everybody was all organized. Their houses were clean, more or less, and they had matzot and food all ready for them to start their Yontif. Now they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do, and they can't just pack into anyone's houses because everybody here in Israel has got the same thing. We're all living in this situation that we don't know what's going to happen any second, and whoever has got bomb shelters in their house is not made for 30 people. It's made for just the family people who are there. So they all need help. Everybody needs help to get back to what they need.
Most people here have kids, 5, 6 kids, large families, and they're looking for a place, a roof over their head where to live. And one of the solutions is to find in the south of the country, not in the center of Israel, a quiet neighborhood which is modest, simple, and homes for people to live. Most people that live here are people that are struggling for their dollar, and they found some type of buildings. As one looks down the block, this is a simple residential place with simple houses for people that should be able to make a living and be able to have a roof over their head and be able to support their children in a normal factor. The city of Arad is known for many years for having more and more residents coming, enjoying the quiet and the sincerity of the city, and they actually are very, very happy with this neighborhood. This week, Saturday night, is one of the nights that Arad will remember it for always. It has changed the face of Arad. Many people that have always felt secure here. People in this building, a family with 6 children, a large family. In this room, actually, we saw the whole cement, everything fell apart. 3 kids sleeping on that floor, all over them. The ambulance emergency system, Hatzalah came to take them out, not knowing if they're alive or dead. Thank God, wonders of wonders, everybody's alive.
The mission of the World Jewish Congress has always been clear: to connect and protect Jewish communities wherever they are. And in moments like this, that mission is not abstract, it's urgent.
Amid the ground war with Lebanon, the IDF has diverted forces from the northern front to Judea and Samaria to control a surge of Jewish violence against Palestinians. The IDF announced it moved an infantry battalion from Lebanon to Judea and Samaria in response to a surge of Jewish extremist attacks against Palestinians. IDF sources warned that this internal threat undermines not only our stability in Judea and Samaria, but also ongoing operations against Hezbollah in Lebanon. The unit from the School for Infantry Corps Professions and Squad Commanders was deployed yesterday, and more troops may be sent if violence continues. The decision came after IDF Central Command Chief Major General Avi Bluth warned that 200 to 300 Jewish anarchists were overwhelming local units, setting homes and vehicles on fire, and that additional forces were needed to restore order. The move also comes amid growing international criticism of Israel's failure to curb settler extremism. Across the Holy Land, families are living under the shadow of war, haunted by the constant wail of sirens. In recent days, rockets launched by Iran's terror proxy Hezbollah have targeted northern Israel. For many, there are just seconds to reach shelter. Civilians have been injured and lives have been lost. Imagine being elderly, unable to move quickly, unable to leave your home. Imagine being a child at night, woken up by explosions. For the people of Israel, this is daily life. Families are displaced, seniors are alone and afraid. Children are growing up with the sounds of missiles overhead. And yet, because of friends like you, they are not alone. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground, providing bomb shelters, food, clothing, emergency aid, and even life-saving support to all who are in harm's way. In times such as these, your compassion brings comfort, safety, and hope to God's people. Stand for Israel, stand for freedom. Give generously today. To rush your gift, call 888-488-IFCJ or go online to ifcj.org. Israel's Knesset has passed a law expanding the powers of state rabbinical courts, allowing them to arbitrate civil and financial disputes, but only with the consent of both parties. The bill passed second and third readings overnight by a vote of 65 to 41, reversing a 2006 Supreme Court decision that barred religious courts from handling such cases outside their religious jurisdiction. Under the new law, rabbinical courts can rule on disputes after they arise and only if both sides agree to religious-based arbitration. It does not apply to marriage, divorce, or labor cases initiated by employers. Supporters say it strengthens personal freedom by letting citizens choose their legal framework. Critics warn it could blur the line between religion and state and create power imbalances, particularly affecting women's rights in conservative communities. And moving on, as Israel navigates ongoing tensions with the Islamic Republic, many families are rethinking what it means to build a secure future here. For some, that includes the dream of owning a home. But in today's climate, the process can feel uncertain and overwhelming. That's where Aliyah comes in. With teams across the country, the company provides end-to-end guidance from choosing the right location to coordinating legal and financial steps. Their goal is simple: to bring clarity and confidence to buyers during a complex time. Because today, buying a home in Israel isn't just an investment, it's a step towards stability. To learn more, scan the QR code on your screen. Israel's leading airlines are trying to adapt to new wartime restrictions at Ben Gurion Airport. El Al will operate flights to only 7 destinations: New York, Los Angeles, Miami, London, Paris, Rome, and Athens, with arriving flights not subject to passenger limits. Priority will go to humanitarian and medical cases. Israel will fly to 5 destinations: Athens, Larnaca, Rome, Tbilisi, and Addis Ababa, capping departures at 50 passengers and reducing operations by half. Both airlines say these routes will serve as hubs for continuing travel abroad. The Transportation Ministry imposed the restrictions after increased Iranian missile attacks, limiting Ben Gurion to 1 flight per hour. With regular flights severely limited, many travelers are crossing into Egypt via Taba or Jordan via Aqaba to catch flights, facing long delays, high costs, and uncertainty ahead of Passover. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see rainy showers alongside steady temperatures with highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media. That's ILTV_Israel on all platforms. You can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching. Welcome back to Axis of Truth. Another week here in Israel, another week running to bomb shelters as the war against the Islamic regime continues. And while Iranians are risking their lives and even celebrating when the regime's military infrastructure is hit, you'd never know that from much of the media in the United States and the UK. That's why, to kick off the show today, we're going through some of the greatest hits of this war so far in the international media. This is a parade of some of the most distorted, morally confused, and absurd media coverage that we've seen in years. And that's saying a lot given we just survived October 7th a few years ago. Let's start with CNN. Now, this week, CNN aired 4 minutes straight of Mojtaba Khamenei speaking directly from Islamic Republic State Television, a regime media network that's currently under sanctions by the United States. No pushback or context was given, just straight propaganda from a government that spent decades funding terrorism and killing Americans. Now, you may have also heard by now that CNN sent a reporter into Iran with the permission of the regime itself, which means that every second of that reporting that was taking place under government supervision, and it was with their permission. But the absurdity didn't stop there for CNN. Christiane Amanpour ran a segment about the Iran-Iraq war in which the Islamic regime sent children across minefields as human shields. Now, thousands of children were given plastic keys and sent to walk across landmines so that soldiers wouldn't have to. This is one of the most horrific crimes in the regime's history, and there's a lot of crimes. But instead of presenting this as a war crime against children, the segment framed it as a symbol of national devotion and love for the regime. Children being sent to their deaths was presented as a heartwarming story. Check this out.
President Trump called for Iran's military to lay down its arms or face certain death. But he and his war planners had failed to understand or remember the strong religious fervor that commits millions to face death in the name of their faith and guarding their Islamic revolution. So we dug into the archives to find In the Name of God, the incredible series based on exclusive footage acquired by CNN in the 80s at the height of the Iran-Iraq war. In this piece, we see a boy, Mohammed, at the very most 17 years old, probably younger, who was recruited for the front by Iran's paramilitary, the Basij. His family bid him a fond farewell, knowing that he would likely be martyred, for one of these children's missions would be acting as human minesweepers.
These kids just received 2 weeks training and just how to shoot with the guns, and they send them to battlefield using them for the minefield to destroy it.
Landmines have been the focus of much outcry in this war, specifically the use of human minesweepers, waves of young volunteers going to their deaths, paving the way for tanks that are in short supply.
And if that wasn't enough, Amanpour then hosted Reza Aslan, who confidently declared that Iranians are now rallying around the flag in support of the regime. Take a look.
And death starts raining down from the skies, what tends to happen is that people rally to their government regardless of how much they hate their government.
Really? That same old tired and disproven trope? Because the images we actually see coming from Iranians in the streets of Iran and across the diaspora show something very, very different. The flag the Iranians are waving isn't the flag of the Islamic Republic. It's the lion and sun flag, the flag of Iran before the 1979 revolution, the symbol of Iran, the Iran they hope to rebuild after the regime is gone. But if you watched that segment, you would never know that. And CNN wasn't the only outlet having a bad week. Over at Haaretz, the paper ran a profile of Ali Larijani with the remarkable headline, "Ruthless Leader, Brilliant Philosopher Ali Larijani, Iran's Most Powerful Man." Brilliant philosopher? This is the same regime official who has been sanctioned and plays a central role in the regime's oppression of Iranians as well as terror activities. Instead of presenting him as one of the architects of that repression, the article portrayed him as some sort of intellectual statesman to humanize his image. Over in the UK, Channel 4 continued the embarrassing war reporting by claiming that Israel had shut down access to Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan for Muslims. Except that's not at all what happened. The restrictions in question were Home Front Command civil defense guidelines that apply to everyone in Israel during periods of heavy ballistic missile fire. They require people to remain within a certain distance of a bomb shelter, and they prohibit large gatherings, to prevent mass casualties in war. And yet somehow the report framed it as a religious persecution. But perhaps the most morally disturbing example this week came after the attempted terror attack on a Jewish school in Michigan. On March 12th, the Lebanese-American man rammed a vehicle packed with explosives into Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan. Now, the building contained a preschool with more than 140 children inside at the time. 140 children were in that building. Now, in somewhat of a miracle, the attacker was killed after security responded and prevented what could have been a terrible mass casualty terror attack. But instead of universal condemnation, what we're seeing in response from some parts of the media is something else entirely. On GB News, for example, commentator Angelina McCahey suggested that the synagogue may have been targeted because it aligns with Israel and because Israel is in its name. Check this out.
Have these attacks been predominantly against Jewish targets?
Well, I can't really speak on that directly. I can say that this situation, this was an Israeli temple. It was aligned with Israel. I will say that.
A Jewish temple?
A Jewish temple.
Jewish synagogue is not an Israeli temple.
It's called the Real Israel Temple.
They're Jewish.
Okay.
They're the people of Israel.
How do you? So I just finished my point. So
it was wrong from the premise. They're not Israeli. They're Jewish.
So they're called the Real Israeli Temple, yes, and they do align with Israel and their beliefs. So this attack. Also, what we found out from the guy who attacked them was that he did have family in Lebanon that was killed from strikes, and that was confirmed. We don't know whether or not who those family members were, but it was posted on social media, his social media, the night prior to the attack, that it was actually his family and his kids that were killed.
I'm almost speechless in response to the level of stupidity here. Think about how insane that argument is. First off, to be so insanely ignorant that you don't understand a synagogue called Temple Israel has nothing to do with the modern day state of Israel. And second, to bring that up as if it's somehow relevant or mitigating when someone drives a truck full of explosives into a children's school in America because they are Jews. What year are we living in? Also, bringing up the fact that he has relatives who died in Lebanon is completely irrelevant, but even more so when you understand that his family are in Hezbollah, and his brother was actually a Hezbollah commander. So it's not at all surprising since Hezbollah has been attacking Israelis nonstop since joining the war. This isn't analysis. It's an attempt to remove responsibility from the terrorist and shift it to the victim. And yes, holding American Jews responsible for the policies of a country thousands of miles away that they don't even live in is anti-Semitism. Sadly, the moral confusion didn't stop there this week. The New York Times ran headlines that sounded less like reporting on a terrorist attack and more like a character profile. A restaurant worker was a quiet presence. Then he attacked a synagogue. In other words, the story wasn't the terrorist trying to massacre Jewish children. The story was humanizing the terrorist. And if you wonder where Angelina on GB News got this idiotic idea about Temple Israel, well, look how the New York Times titled the story about this synagogue. Temple Israel was founded in 1941, dedicated to the formation of a Jewish state. What? A house of worship in Michigan's defining trait is being dedicated to forming a Jewish state? Unfortunately, this same narrative of how the terrorist family members were killed in Lebanon was also pushed by Dropsite News, a media network funded through Soros-connected networks, which amplified stories designed to generate sympathy for the attacker, a narrative that was quickly echoed by useful idiots like Megyn Kelly. Now, the most insane part about all of this, though, is that even if the synagogue was owned by the Israeli government and was full of IDF soldiers, so what? You still don't have a right to drive a truck full of explosives into a house of worship. Why are we even debating this? Only when it comes to anti-Semitic attacks, we hear this endless excuse-making and posturing, oh, Israel, shut up already. This is how extremism gets normalized, not through open support of terrorism, but through the slow introduction of excuses. And this problem doesn't stop with mainstream media. A recent analysis found that many of the most viral posts from this war pushing anti-American
and anti-Israel narratives are not even coming from American accounts. They're coming from networks of accounts operating outside the United States that are coordinating to push these narratives into Western audiences. In other words, while Iranians are risking their lives to fight the regime, the information environment in the West is being flooded with completely distorted narratives that serve the regime's interests. And when you step back and look at this entire week of coverage, whether social media or media, the most extraordinary thing is not what's happening in Iran. The most extraordinary thing is how badly much of the Western media is failing to cover it. Because the biggest obstacle to understanding what's happening right now isn't a lack of information. It's the way that information is being presented to you in America. Beyond understanding evil, however, there are other consequences of this disinformation campaign. And while some media figures are busy humanizing the Islamic regime or minimizing the threat that it posed, the real-world consequences are already paying out across multiple continents with small-scale terror attacks and anti-Semitic violence. According to data from the Combat Antisemitism movement, global anti-Semitic incidents increased by 34% just the first week of the war. Out of 154 incidents recorded worldwide, 73 were linked directly to the war in Iran, with perpetrators motivated by support for the regime or by conspiracy theories blaming Jews and Israel for the conflict. And that surge isn't just online hate. It's showing up in real-world attacks. Take the United States. In the terror attack in Michigan, Ayman Mohammed Ghazali targeted Temple Israel, which is a major synagogue in the area that also houses that Jewish preschool I mentioned, where 140 children and staff were inside the building. The only reason that a major massacre didn't take place is because of a heroic security guard who succeeded in stopping him before he could reach the children. But that wasn't the only incident in the United States, tragically. In Austin, Texas, a gunman opened fire in a mass shooting that killed 2 people and wounded 14 others. Investigators found he was wearing a shirt reading "Property of Allah" and an undershirt with the flag of the Islamic Republic. Authorities also found Iranian symbols in his possessions. In New York City, 2 men named Amir Balat and Ibrahim Kayumi were arrested after throwing an IED into a crowd during a protest near Gracie Mansion, the residence of the mayor of New York. Now, federal investigators say the men were inspired by ISIS and even discussed carrying out what they called an attack even larger than the Boston Marathon bombing. Now in San Jose, California, 2 Jewish men speaking Hebrew were violently assaulted at a restaurant, with the attacker shouting, "Don't mess with Iran," and other anti-Semitic slurs as he beat them. So in 1 week, you have a Hezbollah-connected attack on a synagogue in Michigan, a mass shooting in Texas with Iranian symbolism, an ISIS-inspired IED attack attempt in New York, and a violent anti-Semitic assault in California. In Canada, the situation is even worse. Not only has Canada become a front line in the regime's campaign of anti-Semitic attacks, with 3 different synagogues being fired at last week, but there's also been intimidation and violence against Iranian dissidents abroad, to the point that Canada really cannot protect them. Earlier this month, Canadian police arrested 2 suspects who are now being charged with first-degree murder in the killing of an Iranian dissident, Masoud Masjoudi, a former instructor at Simon Fraser University, who had been reported missing in Burnaby, British Columbia. Now, investigators said that Masjoudi's disappearance wasn't random and treated it as a targeted homicide from the start. The suspects identified by police are Mehdi Ahmadzadeh Razavi and Arizu Sultani, both from the Vancouver area. Now, they're facing first-degree murder charges in connection with his death, but the case has raised alarm amongst Iranians inside of Canada, as well as lawmakers who have raised alarms for years about the IRGC networks and its associates operating inside Canada. They're monitoring and intimidating members of the Iranian diaspora. Now, across Europe, we're seeing similar patterns. In the UK, dissidents have been beaten by regime thugs at protests, and anti-Semitic attacks are also growing. In Belgium, an explosion damaged a synagogue in what authorities called a targeted anti-Semitic incident. In Rotterdam, a synagogue was targeted in an arson attack. In Amsterdam, an explosive device was detonated outside a Jewish school, which the officials described after the fact as a deliberate attack against the Jewish community. Security services are also investigating incidents around synagogues in Oslo and Trondheim, both in Norway, where suspicious individuals were arrested near Jewish institutions. And these attacks are not random. A new extremist group calling itself Ashab al-Yamin, or the Companions of the Right, has claimed responsibility for some of these attacks, including the incidents in Belgium and the most recent one in the Netherlands just a few days ago. The group appeared suddenly this week and released videos calling for attacks against Jewish targets. Now, what's particularly concerning is that these videos were distributed through Telegram channels that are associated with the Shiite Axis network of groups that are linked to Hezbollah and the IRGC, raising obvious questions about whether this new organization is connected to the Islamic Republic's proxy network. And that's exactly what security services have been warning about for years. The IRGC has built a global network of proxies, militias, ideological supporters that can operate far beyond Iran's borders. They're networks that target Jewish communities and Iranian dissidents, and ultimately anyone who challenges the regime. So when people claim that this war is just a regional conflict that has nothing to do with the West, that it's not our war, the events of this week tell a very different story. The synagogue attack in Michigan, the mass shooting in Texas, an IED attack in New York, gunshots at 3 separate synagogues in Canada, a murdered Iranian dissident, a violent anti-Semitic assault in California, a synagogue bombing in Belgium, an arson attack in Rotterdam, an explosive device targeting a Jewish school in Amsterdam, and suspicious activity around 2 more synagogues in Norway. It's not random. It's the global shadow of a regime that has spent 47 years building proxy cells and other terror networks across multiple continents. And the events of this week show exactly how far those networks can reach. But there is another front in this conflict that often receives far less attention than it should. It's the war that the Islamic Republic has been waging against its own athletes for decades. And this week, we saw another example of that system in action. As I talked about last week, several members of Iran's women's national football team competing at the Women's Asian Cup in Australia defected after refusing to sing the national anthem of the regime before their match and then getting threatened by the regime immediately after. Now, in the days since then, some of the players who initially sought protection in Australia have reversed course and are now returning to Iran after reports of intense pressure on them, their families, and threats from the regime. Now, those who were working on this case did confirm that the players were most likely coerced and that their families back in Iran were being pressured, which is a method that that government has repeatedly used against athletes, journalists, and activists. In other words, even when Iranian athletes are thousands of miles away, the regime still has ways of reaching them. The West is unable to protect many of these dissidents. Part of the reason is because they've allowed the IRGC to build up a presence in so many of these countries. And this repression of athletes, it's hardly a new phenomenon. In 2020, the regime executed Navid Afkari, a champion wrestler who had participated in anti-regime protests in 2018. They executed him after brutal torture and despite international pressure. The year before that, we saw Iranian judoka Saeed Molai fled the country after being ordered by government officials in Iran to withdraw from the World Championships so that he wouldn't have to face off against Israeli judoka Sagi Muki. Now, this policy of forcing athletes to boycott Israeli opponents has been documented for many years across multiple sports, including judo, wrestling, boxing, and weightlifting. Athletes who refuse to follow those orders risk their careers or worse. One of the most prominent defectors is Kimia Alizadeh, who was Iran's first ever women's Olympic medalist in Taekwondo. Alizadeh later left the country and announced that she couldn't represent a system that used athletes as political propaganda while denying women basic rights. She competed for the Olympic refugee team instead in 2020. Now, this history of repression against athletes in Iran actually goes back much further. In 1988, Forzun Abdi, the captain of the women's national volleyball team, was executed after spending years in prison for opposing the regime. That same year, Mashid Barzagi, a member of the Olympic soccer team, was executed for distributing anti-government newspapers. And in 1981, Olympic wrestler for the country of Iran was executed alongside 29 other political prisoners. The list goes on and on. This history, is not just about individual cases. It's about a system where the Islamic Republic uses sport as a tool of political propaganda and ideological control. They've even used international sporting events to normalize and sanitize their security apparatus. At the Tokyo Olympics, Iranian gold medal winning shooter Javad Foroughi won a gold medal while also being a member of the IRGC who served the regime in Syria. But the truth is that the entire structure of sports organizations in Iran is closely tied to the regime itself. The current head of the Iranian Olympic Committee, Mahmoud Khosrovi-Vafa, has served in the IRGC and was even a former bodyguard of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. In other words, the institution that's supposed to represent Iranian athletes in the Olympic movement is directly connected to the same power structure that controls the country politically. And this is one of the reasons why a growing group of Iranian athletes and human rights advocates have launched a campaign calling for the dissolution of the Iranian Olympic Committee. In open letters sent to the International Olympic Committee, athletes document how the Iranian sports system operates under government control. They describe a structure in which athletes are monitored, threatened, and forced to follow state ideology, including the policy of boycotting competing against Israeli athletes. Now, this system violates the core principles of the Olympic Charter, which require sport to be free from political discrimination as well as government interference. As long as the current structure remains in place, Iranian athletes are going to continue to face intimidation and political pressure. And this issue is not limited to athletes because the regime even polices its own fans. Inside Iran, women are still forbidden from attending football matches, and there have been multiple incidents in which women were even assaulted, beaten, or pepper sprayed by security forces for trying to enter stadiums. Sport in Iran isn't just sport, it's a political system. And given the history, there's an increasingly strong argument that Iranian athletes should not be forced to compete under the flag of the regime that controls that system. The international community has already taken a similar approach in other cases. Russian athletes, for example, were allowed to compete, but only as neutral athletes under a blank flag rather than representing the Russian state. The same principle can and should apply here. Because if sport is supposed to represent fair competition and human dignity, then Iranian athletes themselves need to be protected from the political system that controls them. And now it's time for this week's Good, Bad, and Ugly, which we're doing in reverse order so we can end on a positive note. So this week, the ugly story goes to the regime's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, who sat down with CBS host Margaret Brennan and declared that the reason he has internet is because he's the voice of the Iranian people. Can't make this up. Take a look.
I just do want to point out, you're speaking to us via Zoom. The Iranian people don't have open internet access, but you do. Why?
Well, because I'm the voice of Iranians, and I have to defend their right. So this is why I have access to internet to just have our voice being heard by the international community. But internet is closed because of the security reasons, because we are under attack, we are under aggression, and we have to do everything to protect our people. In any country, there are urgent measures taken for the sake of war.
Protect your people? Are you kidding me? You just murdered 40,000 of them. But according to Araghchi, he, being the regime, speaks for the Iranian people. Now, in ordinary circumstances, that claim might be more laughable than anything else, but right now it's particularly absurd because at the very moment that Araghchi was making that claim on American television, the Islamic Republic has shut down the internet access across Iran for nearly 2 weeks. 92 million people completely cut off from the world. Iranians inside the country have been desperately trying to connect through Starlink, also punishable by death, or through other internet filtering workarounds and VPNs, simply to communicate with family members abroad. So the government, cutting off an entire country from the internet, now wants the American public to believe that it's the voice of the people? Are you serious? If the regime actually represented the Iranian people, it wouldn't need to shut down the internet every time there's a crisis. It wouldn't need to silence the public or control information. But the internet blackout actually tells you and the entire world everything we need to know. The Islamic Republic isn't afraid of foreign governments. It's afraid of its own people. And Abbas Araghchi certainly doesn't speak for them. And now let's move on to the bad story of the week. And this one goes to Tucker Carlson, which could be for many reasons, even this week. But I want to hone in on one. This week, Carlson pushed another ridiculous claim about the Middle East that was shot down by none other than his favorite country, Qatar. Carlson bluntly told his audience that Saudi Arabia and Qatar had arrested Mossad agents who were supposedly plotting bombings inside those countries. He presented this claim as evidence that Israel was secretly destabilizing the region, like everything else he claims. Check it out.
It really, really hurts these countries. And Israel wanted to hurt these countries. That's the point. Wanted to hurt these countries. Wanted to sow chaos and disorder because they are rivals of Israel. So it's probably hasn't been reported, but it's a fact that last night in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, authorities arrested Mossad agents planning on committing bombings in those countries. Now, that's weird. That doesn't make any sense. Why would the Israelis be committing bombings in two Gulf countries, which are also being attacked by Iran? Aren't they on the same side? No. Israel wants to hurt Iran and Qatar and UAE and Saudi and Bahrain and Oman and Kuwait.
There's just one problem. The governments involved say that didn't happen. Qatar's foreign ministry publicly rejected the claim and said it had no information about any Mossad operatives being arrested in the country. And what Qatar did announce was something very, very different. Authorities said they detained 10 individuals connected to a network linked to the IRGC. Now, according to reports, the cell was suspected of conducting surveillance and sabotage operations connected to Iranian security services. In other words, the actual story was about Iranian operatives, not Mossad. And this matters because the IRGC, as we've spoken about, has spent decades building proxy networks across the region. Gulf states like Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE have all accused the Islamic Republic of running militant cells and espionage networks inside their borders. Instead of pointing this out, Carlson is again scapegoating Israel with zero evidence and inventing the entire story. That's not just a small error. It fits a pattern that we've seen since before this war even began from Tucker Carlson. Whether it's commentators, activists, or social media personalities, there's a constant effort to shift focus away from the regime in Tehran and towards some supposed Western or Israeli conspiracy. But when you actually look at the facts, the threat networks keep leading back to the same place, the Islamic Republic. This entire week was just another example of that. Now, with that said, I want to move to the final story of this week, the good. This one comes from inside Iran because while the regime continues to try to project strength, what we're actually seeing on the ground is something different. Over the past few days, Israeli drones have been targeting IRGC and Basij checkpoints. These are the places used by the regime to control cities and intimidate Iranians, preventing them from protesting. But that's not something that the IDF is going to tolerate anymore. According to information from sources inside Iran, more than a dozen IRGC and Basij checkpoints have been targeted by drone strikes in just the past 2 days. The resulting damage has been severe, with more than 100 regime operatives being killed and many more injured. But the military damage is only part of the story here. The internal reaction inside the regime's security forces is what really matters at this point. Reports from inside Iran indicate that hundreds of Basij operatives are now refusing to report to their checkpoint positions. Others are abandoning their posts altogether. The regime is struggling to keep these units supplied with basic necessities like food, equipment, and some regime forces who do show up are now sleeping in tents because their bases have been destroyed or are considered too dangerous to use. In other cases, they've been seen moving into schools and mosques. And of course, over the weekend, we also saw videos of them moving checkpoints under bridges to hide from the IDF's drones. When these forces are beginning to panic, hide, or desert their posts, it shows the cracks in the regime's ability to control the country. And that's exactly what sources are reporting. At this point, the fall of the regime is really only a matter of time. Well, that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with more updates from across the region and all the latest from the war in Iran. If you have a story that you think I should cover, feel free to reach out to me on social media, Emily K. Schrader, or on Instagram at Emily in Tel Aviv. Until next time, see you right here on Axis of Truth on JNS.
And due to the ongoing security situation, Israel has now cut Ben Gurion Airport traffic to 1 flight per hour and slashed passenger limits. Transportation Minister Miri Regev and senior officials have ordered further restrictions at Ben Gurion Airport, reducing outbound passengers from 120 to about 50 per flight and cutting overall flight activity. The new measures took effect overnight. They allow only 1 departing flight and 1 arriving flight per hour, halving all available slots and deepening the shortage of outbound flights. The move follows earlier restrictions after interception debris damaged aircraft last week and comes as the airport continues to operate under strict security protocols amid the ongoing conflict. Kia Airlines now says it will shift most operations to Aqaba, Jordan and Taba, Egypt for destinations like New York, Bangkok and Hanoi, while maintaining limited humanitarian flights from Ben Gurion. And El Al is reviewing a reduced schedule and is calling for Ramon Airport near Eilat to help relieve the pressure. Senior aviation officials warn many travelers may not be able to fly during the holiday period. And this as hundreds of thousands of Israelis are expected to fly starting from this week ahead of the Passover holiday. And turning now to London, where 4 ambulances belonging to the Jewish Hatzalah organization were torched overnight in North London in what UK police are treating as an anti-Semitic hate crime. The vehicles were parked outside the Machzikei Hadat synagogue in Golders Green. The Metropolitan Police said an investigation is underway and officers remain on the scene. Police confirmed there were no casualties in the fire that destroyed the 4 ambulances. Superintendent Sarah Jackson of the Metropolitan Police said officers remain on the scene, reviewing CCTV and online footage, and are looking for 3 suspects. She added that the police will engage with faith leaders, increase patrols, and urged anyone with information to come forward, including anonymously. Footage showed the 3 hooded individuals pouring gasoline on the ambulances and setting them ablaze.
Several missile salvos from the Islamic Republic were launched at Israel today, one of them hitting a train station in Holon in central Israel. Our correspondent Alec Pollard is there now with more updates. Alec, what can you tell us?
Right, Emily. So as you mentioned, there have been 3 salvos already into central Israel in the morning and the afternoon. One of them was over here at the Holon Juncture train station. This was one of those cluster munitions that scored a direct hit here at the station. You can even see some of the damage behind me here in the background. Right over there, you can see it. And that was the damage that was done, which is why this station has been shut down now. So it's not in operation. I also had the chance to go inside. They're not letting people inside, but since I arrived here, there has been another salvo, and they have a safe space in there. So I asked to go inside and saw what the condition is. Station is in relatively good condition. You can see some massive water leaks. So obviously they hit some of the piping over there, which is something that happened. So that's like some of the damage that we're seeing here from the station, and also some other light damage in other areas across central Israel. No serious injuries from this barrage in particular. And of course, there was also the strikes that happened yesterday, where there were 2 homes, one in Rishon LeZion, one in Shoam, again, both relatively in central Israel, that suffered some damage from these salvos. So the Iranian missiles are continuing to hit using those cluster munitions, which are aimed at civilians to cause as much damage to civilians, right? This is not the type of bomb you use to hit a military target, for example, to try to strike a building or to try to blow something up. It's intended to have that shrapnel effect to try to harm as many civilians as possible. Luckily, in this case, there were no casualties from the strike, but it did cause some damage, not too significant, but some damage to the station here, which is out of operation in the moment.
All right, well, thank you for that update. We'll continue to keep you all updated on what's going on the ground. But our correspondent, Alec Pollard, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Let's take a look at the latest developments. It is day 26 of the war with Iran, and Operation Roaring Lion continues with Israeli airstrikes on Iranian missile launchers, targeted elimination of operatives, and the bombing of weapon production sites. The IDF sent ongoing waves of airstrikes on the Iranian terror regime's ballistic missile program aimed at reducing threats to Israel's home front. Over 600 strikes have hit missile infrastructure in recent days. Intelligence reports low morale, absenteeism, and wear among Revolutionary Guard's missile units. Operatives are fearing for their safety and reportedly refusing to enter launch sites due to systematic targeted strikes. The Israeli Air Force destroyed a loaded ballistic missile launcher ready to be fired at Israel. Footage shows the IDF shows the launcher neutralized, preventing an attack. Additional strikes hit storage and launch sites, including personnel across western Iran. On the home front, a wave of Iranian airstrikes at Israel this morning, with air raid sirens ringing out 3 times in 1 hour across central Israel. One missile landed in an open area as Iran apparently tried to target the Hadera power station. No injuries or damages reported in those strikes. Meanwhile, the 27-year-old woman killed in a Hezbollah rocket attack on northern Israel yesterday has been identified as Nuriel Dubin, a youth counselor who was about to be married. She was fatally wounded by shrapnel on Road 90 after a barrage of around 30 rockets targeted the Rosh Pinah area. 2 others were lightly injured. MDA medics said they found her unconscious with severe injuries and were forced to declare her dead at the scene. Separately, an Iranian missile impact in Sfat lightly wounded 2 people from glass shards. President Trump says Iran has offered a, quote, very significant prize related to oil, gas, and the Strait of Hormuz, and says a resolution to the war could be possible. Trump claims the U.S. and Iran have held productive talks on a complete end to hostilities. The talks involving his envoy Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and other senior officials. Trump says Iran wants to make a deal. Some U.S. strikes on Iranian targets have been postponed as negotiations continue, signaling a possible diplomatic off-ramp. Iran, though, denies any talks are taking place, accusing Trump of using negotiations to escape a difficult situation. Now, Trump says the talks have gone perfectly, but warned if negotiations fail, military action will continue. Let's take a listen to President Trump.
If we can end this without more lives being down, without knocking out $10 billion electric plants that are brand new and the apple of their eye, I'd like to be able to do that, you know. But they can't have certain things. I mean, you know the things. I don't have to go over the list, but again, it starts with no nuclear weapons, and they've agreed to that. There won't be any nuclear weapons. They're not going to have, and they're not going to have enrichment, any of those things. But look, I hate to say that we're in a very good bargaining position, and I hate to say that they're defenseless because, you know, until that last missile is fired, they have little power. But we are in about the best bargaining position.
For their part, Iranian officials continue to deny the existence of talks with the U.S. An Iranian military spokesperson says the U.S. is negotiating with itself. And speaking directly to the U.S. president, that Iranian military spokesman said, people like us can never get along with people like you. That remark comes a day after the president said Tehran wants to make a deal. to end the war. And that ends this update on ILTV. Of course, you continue to follow us on our broadcast or on our social media platform. You can check out our app. There is the QR code there on your screen. I'm Khaled Ben David. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned with ILTV.
Missiles rain down on Israel from both Lebanon and Iran as the war reaches a tipping point. President Trump's new red line: open the Strait of Hormuz or we take out your power grid. Will the IRGC bend to his ultimatum over the next 24 hours or double down? Up next on today's Quad. The last 24 to 48 hours have been absolutely insane. We are still remote. And this week, we actually have our own correspondent on the ground, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, all the way on the Lebanese border. We have Sogan Fakheri, who is a wonderful expert on Iran at the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs, and Shoshana Keats-Jaskal, founder of Chokhmat Nashim. Let's go to you, Emily, on the Lebanon border.
Yes, all right. Well, just as you turned to me, there was a giant boom heard behind me, right over the hills. I'm on the Lebanese border. Actually, behind me, you can see the green behind me. That's actually Lebanese territory. The reason I'm wearing a bulletproof vest right now is in case there is shrapnel from a missile fire. Now, there's been, just in the past few days since Hezbollah formally got involved in this war, over 1,000 missiles and drones that have been fired at the north. There are hundreds of thousands of residents here, civilians that are being fired on a almost hourly basis. So a very risky situation here. I'm told that if there is a siren in where I'm standing right now, I don't even have time to get to a shelter. I will have to just drop to the ground. It's also possible that I may have to log off. We'll see. I hope to make it through the whole episode today.
Let's hope
but
so.
yeah, I am reporting here, and hopefully we're able to see some stability restored for the South here. We don't want to see another evacuation as we've seen. But I mean, I think the way that the international media and even within Israel, there's not a lot of awareness of just how bad, how catastrophic this situation is for so many of the residents here in northern Israel. They're under heavy, heavy rocket and missile fire. And, we're feeling it in the center from the Islamic Republic, but they're getting it from the Islamic Republic and Hezbollah at the same time. So definitely a whole other front, a whole other ball game that we're seeing on the ground here in the fight against the Islamic Republic and really all its proxies.
Absolutely. Are you seeing a lot of army mobilization? I know that the Israeli army is now going in to Lebanon, going into all the way to the Litani River. Do you feel it? Do you feel that we're going in there?
So driving up here today, it was actually a sense of calm and normalcy that I wasn't expecting to find. When I visited and reported here before on the border shortly after October 7th, it was a lot more empty. It felt like a ghost town. That's not really what we're seeing right now. I do see people here. I see cars driving, not a lot of population, but certainly there are signs of life, so to speak, from the communities here. Part of that is because those communities have started to return with the ceasefire that was, before with Hezbollah, despite the fact that the IDF was consistently acting against Hezbollah's violations in Lebanon. But I think the reason we're seeing people return here is really it's a sign of Israeli resilience. It's a sign that we're not going to back down. We're not going to give up. We're not going to surrender this area and allow it to become a stronghold for missile and drone fire from Hezbollah or from anyone else. So it's actually been inspiring so far today to see how resolute the residents are that I've spoken to just so far about what's happening now.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, I think, is what's happening on the other side of the border. Are the Lebanese saying enough is enough? Let's watch this for a second.
ما في أغدر من هيك ما في أجرم من هيك حزب الله بتقييمي أنا غدر ببيئته هي ونايمة وطلع أطلق الصواريخ من دون ما يحطهم بالجو، إنه نحن كان على أساس قبل بيومين اخذين موافقة منه الحكومة والرئيس بري إنه هن ما رح يتدخلوا بالموضوع. عالم بتقوم بتلملم حالها بتصرخ مش عارفة حالها شو بدها تعمل، لأنه بطبيعة الحال إسرائيل صار في عندها حجة إنه هي ترد. فما بعرف مين أغدر من مين، يعني عادة العدو الإسرائيلي عم ينذر قبل ما عم يضرب. حزب الله طلع أطلق الصواريخ بكل برودة أعصاب.
مين بتحمل ما غيره نعيم قاسم، الله لا يعطيه عافية. شو بتقول له لنعيم قاسم؟ إذا بده ينتحر يروح ينتحر بطهران، ما ينتحر بلبنان. بدنا نعيش. ورطونا ورطة ما لنا فيها. حسب الله.
بإيدنا عملنا ببلدنا هيك، لو نحن بقينا مناقيين عن كل شيء ما وصلنا له.
Sogand, are the Lebanese saying enough is enough? Do you think this is the beginning of the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran's most poisonous proxy?
I always do. Whenever people wake up and open their eyes to the new reality and they're willing to say enough, it's just like a stone that just getting off the hill. So yeah, I do, and I'm really happy about it. I'm not a Lebanese expert or anything, but from the voices I hear on social media and a lot of people saying, Lebanon is such a great place for a nightlife and parties, and as a young woman, I die to go there and just have fun with them. And as I speak with Lebanese people, they're like so willing to open the borders and just come here. We'll go there, have parties both in Lebanon and Israel. I'm just, people and light will win over everything else.
Amen. Shoshana, how exhausted are we all? I get asked all the time when I do media interviews, how's Israel holding up? How's Israel holding up? And I say to people, we're incredibly resilient. We've been at this for 2.5 years. Now we've got 2 more wars within a war. Shoshana, what do you say to people when they ask you?
It's an interesting, like you're saying, it's a little bit of a dichotomy because you want to say we're strong and then also you're exhausted. You're emotionally exhausted. You're physically exhausted. The warnings, the sirens, the where is everybody? It's a heightened state all the time, which when you sit down for a minute, you realize, oh my God, I'm exhausted. It's like, this is why they say, don't sit down. You won't get up because you can just keep, you go. Your adrenaline pushes you. And then, so yeah, I think it's both. We are resilient and we are exhausted. And what Emily is saying is very true. Every time, even if I'm not receiving the siren, I think of the people in the north who have, I think, like between 5 and 9 seconds. And sometimes they don't even hear a siren. And they're getting it both from Hezbollah and Iran. And the Iranian regime knows what they're doing. They know that they're pounding an already vulnerable population. And so on top of your own physical, your own anxiety, your own things that you're dealing with, many of us are really feeling for the people who have it so much worse. And it's like a lot of them.
That's interesting you bring that up because I was just discussing last night with some colleagues and Sogand, I'm sure you can relate to this, having so many contacts and so many relations inside of Iran, that we feel the pressure from our own community, first and foremost, and our own sense of urgency, the risk that's in front of us. We also feel it from the entire nation. We also feel it from the entire Jewish community, which is also facing crazy anti-Semitism and ongoing attacks, even on foreign soil, as well as increased threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And beyond that, as someone who interacts with a lot of Iranians on the ground inside of Iran, I'm feeling it for them as well. It's a constant state of stress. This is not a conflict that, we wanted. We want Iran to be free. We want those people to be liberated, but it's very, very heavy. It's emotionally taxing all the time.
Exactly.
To witness what's going on, to be worried about what's happening, to be worried about the safety of people that I'm speaking to. Some of the people I'm speaking to can get into trouble just for speaking to me inside of Iran. That's a lot of weight to carry. And, obviously it's not as bad as being in the direct line of fire as some of those, people are when it comes to Iran, although not direct line, but adjacent to the targets. But it's very taxing. It's a heavy situation.
How are people reacting to that? Is this kind of a new phase? Are they being more resolute? Are they saying, let's just finish the job? Because a year ago, or more than a year ago, the residents of the north were told to come back because the threat of Hezbollah had somehow been eliminated or diminished to the point that they could go and live. Is there a resentment, or is there like, let's stop messing around and finish this once and for all? It's been decades.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is that sense of frustration, but I also, from being here just in the limited time I've been here so far today, there's definitely a resoluteness. I would say even more so than we saw post October 7th, that, you know, a determination to actually finish the job. Obviously, there's a demand from the government to do the job, but also a complete lack of trust and reliance on the international community. I mean, when we're looking at what happened in Lebanon, UN Resolution 1557 called for the disarming of Hezbollah. After that, the UN Resolution 1701 called for Hezbollah evacuating from anywhere south of the Litani, like within Lebanon, or sorry, yeah, south of the Litani. None of those things happened. UNIFIL was instilled with $1 billion, multi-billion dollar mandate to do that job. They did nothing. In fact, many of them colluded with Hezbollah. Hezbollah has been degraded by the IDF since October 7th, but with the Islamic Republic of Iran, their primary sponsor, they've been sent almost $1 billion in the past year. So they've been rebuilding all of this time that there's been a so-called ceasefire, albeit a very faulty one, and it's incredibly frustrating to the residents here. I mean, absolutely. But this is the time, both on the front with the Islamic Republic, was very telling. We're seeing more and more Lebanese speaking up than ever before, especially on Arabic social media. They're fed up with the effective colonization of parts of Lebanon. I mean, there are entire villages here that have been, you know, across the border that have been taken over by Hezbollah. In some cases, by IRGC officers who are working with Hezbollah on the ground here. It's a occupation by the Islamic regime in Iran, and the Lebanese are starting to speak about this more and more. And you know, despite the fact they're considered to be enemies of the state of Israel, they are realizing in an increasing number that it is Israel who is ultimately going to be the factor that moves the needle on Hezbollah and hopefully can ultimately restore sovereignty to Lebanon.
I agree with you. I think that actually the big difference that I see between now and a year and a half ago, or 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, is that the Lebanese themselves are saying enough is enough. What has this conflict actually gotten us? We've spiraled as a country. They don't take care of the people. Hezbollah, and it's the same kind of, it's the same language I'm hearing also from people in Iran. They are Islamist occupiers of our land. You hear it in Iran and you're hearing it in Lebanon. And, you know, it gives me hope in a way that maybe are we starting in this region the big Islamic decolonization of the region? Is that what's happening? And if it is, then yes, we have to brace ourselves for this taking a little bit of time. Do you think that's the feeling now?
I think there's definitely a sense of that. I mean, from almost all of the Iranians that I've spoken to, they would agree with that sentiment. And there does seem to be a push to restore sort of the focus on many of the smaller indigenous communities throughout the entire region. I mean, that goes for the Berbers in Morocco, the Kurds in Syria, all these different minority groups that exist within the Middle East that have been colonized and Islamized by occupying, colonizing forces, whether thousands of years ago or more recently in some areas. This is something that we're starting to see the people push back against. And I think that's very justified given what the impact has been from some of those regimes, especially when we're looking at the Islamic regime in Iran.
Well, talking of Iran, Sogand, you know, now we have this situation where Israel has been, over the last 48 hours, bombed it like we've never seen before in the middle of a civilian, you know, in a building, in the middle of a civilian population. We've also seen parts of a cluster bomb fall in the old city of Jerusalem, which is only a few meters away from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, our Temple Mount, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Iran are saying. And what about the fact that the world is waking up to the fact that they can actually send an intercontinental missile as far as the Indian Ocean, which gives you a feeling or gives you an indication that they could also reach Europe. Is this kind of making this more real for people, do you think, Sogand?
Well, you touched so many topics. So I'll start with the Al-Aqsa one. I think that it's the funniest thing because when the whole thing started, like October 7th, when the conflict just got real with Iran directly, they called it Tufan Al-Aqsa. So I'm like, you just rained your Al-Aqsa, just saying. That's for one. And the thing about Arad and Dimona here in Israel, and the civil population, the messages I received, people are crying. In Iran, they're crying for the pictures and the videos and the media on social media, and they're just mourning our people, and they're just thanking us because we are the direct people. They're under this regime who get like the whole fire right now, like most of it.
They recognize
for
that,
their
Sogand?
own
They
freedom.
recognize that we're taking the beat here?
Yeah, they know, and they thank us for like, for, I don't know how to say it, maybe just absorb all this for
Yeah.
their own freedom and
Yeah.
to just help them. And it's really heartwarming because this week, I maybe I'll just connect it. I'm sitting on the floor right now because I had an accident,
Oh,
a car
dear.
accident. So
Oh.
I'm like, I'm just recovering. This is my first interview after this whole week. And the messages I received for Nowruz and for the whole thing, they just hear all the time. They search media all the time, and they don't have shelters. They don't have shelters. They don't have sirens. They don't have any alarms. They don't have anyone to warn them about anything. Also, it's not needed. But they have the IDF spokesperson in Farsi that alerts them from things. And it's crazy. It's just, I feel like it's surreal that they are so with us, like a 90 million population country standing next to a 10 million population country. It's just, my mind is blown all the time, all over again. It's just,
It's
I'm in tears right now. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Sogand, you're 100% right. And they're messaging you when they barely have internet access. That's the other thing, that they are still in blackout. Shoshana did where was the real kind of first carnage of the rocket attacks. And now we have another one in Arad. Does this change things for us, do you think?
It's a good question. I was thinking about it myself. How long can we sustain this? How long can we absorb this? How long, I think there's also a psychological element to this. When you think it's going to be quick and you're going to be in and out, you're like, okay, I can do this. But the longer that it goes on, and I don't know if people are thinking about this, but Passover's coming up. Everyone's Passover plans. Mine have changed 5 times because family was supposed to come in, they can't come in. Family that is in can't leave. The program that we were supposed to be part of in the last minute is canceled. Nobody knows what's going on. And so it's so many layers of, like Emily was saying, like there's so many layers of anxiety and concern and hoping and wishing. And then you have on top of all of that, you have people who are dying, meaning it's not theoretical. It's not just hold on. It's not just be home in your mamad, because a lot of people don't have a safe room in their homes. A lot of people we are among the very lucky. We have one in our home, and we have spaces for people to be. And most people, many people don't have that. That a 70-year-old couple in Tel Aviv is, killed trying to get to a safe room. It's not okay. It's a number, but they're not a number. They're people. And it's very, very, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I feel like, I don't know. The answer is I don't know how long the country, and by the way, no one's even talking about the fact that how many soldiers have been called up again. Like repeat soldiers called up, and there's families again who don't have their mothers or fathers there, mostly fathers. And there's a lot of uncertainty. So yes, it's scary, and yes, it's difficult.
I just want to say, actually, not in, to contradict you, but I do want to say that after speaking with some of the residents of the North, also some of the soldiers who are up here, I think that the fact that we're actually dealing with the head of the snake at the same time has given another push, more momentum to some of these reservists who are being called up again, because they feel like perhaps this time it can be different, especially when it comes to dealing with Hezbollah. We've had multiple wars and it hasn't actually been dealt with because they're not finishing the job. Now there's a sense, or at least a hope in many of the people that I've spoken to, that the reality could be different because we're also dealing with the Islamic Republic at the same time. And I'm hopeful too. I don't want to get ahead of myself in terms of being optimistic. And I'm not a very optimistic person generally, but I do think right now, as it stands, things are going the right direction. I hope that that continues for the sake, honestly, of everybody involved.
I couldn't agree more. And yesterday I was speaking to a soldier who said to me, who's just about to go into Lebanon, and he said to me, look, my father had to go into Lebanon. I'm going into Lebanon now so that my children don't have to go into Lebanon. But I 100% agree with you. Now that we know that we're, up until now, dealing with Hezbollah has been like putting a Band-Aid, a plaster on a problem. Once you deal with the head of the snake and you've cut the head of the snake, then you've dealt with the strategic threat of Hezbollah forever. And on that topic, you know, we get constantly asked, and I feel that people are very impatient. You know, I get asked all the time, when is this going to be over? And I'm thinking, we are getting rid of the biggest threat to humanity. Did you think it was going to happen in 2 weeks? Did you think it was going to happen in 3 weeks? And the next question that I get that I want to pose to all of you is, you know, when will the Iranian people rise, and can they? And what I say to them is, first of all, we have to do as much as we can do in order to make it easier for them to rise. Of course, it'll be up to them eventually, but we've got to help them. They don't have arms. They are helpless. They have been under the yoke of these Islamists for 47 years. So we have to degrade their capacity to fight their own people as much as possible. That's not going to take 2.5 weeks. People seem to be, it's like we are in the age of ADD and the age of instant gratification, and also the age of people not knowing what a real war looks like. And the question that keeps getting asked is, okay, why is this taking so long? And will the Iranian people be able to rise up? And I say the more we do, the better the chance that they can do their part as well.
Well, I think like when it comes to the Iranian people rising up, I mean, they've been told explicitly by President Trump, also by Prime Minister Netanyahu, and also by Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, not to take to the streets yet because it is dangerous, because there are a lot of bombs being dropped on those IRGC besieged targets, even besieged checkpoints being targeted. So I do think we'll see an uprising again. I think we'll see people take to the streets, not sure when, but when the active bombing campaigns are still going on. I mean, Tehran itself saw massive strikes last night. We can't expect people to take to the streets en masse at the exact time, especially, as you mentioned, when there's been almost 3 consecutive weeks of an internet blackout. Very, very few people have access to Starlink, which, by the way, you can get the death penalty for even possessing right now inside of Iran. So very few people have access, which makes it harder to mobilize in the streets. It's not saying it can't happen or it won't happen, but it does make it more difficult. So right now is clearly not yet the time. And I totally agree with you. It's like people forgot, especially in the West, what wars are like, because they've been living under such a privileged society for multiple generations now in the United States that they just have no concept of the realities of war. War is a hideous, ugly thing where innocent people die across the board. I mean, this happens no matter how moral the cause is. Innocent people, including children, are going to die.
Yeah.
That's what happens in war. That's why we don't start wars.
Exactly.
We don't want this to happen.
Exactly.
But the reality is, if we don't, it will be worse, and more people will die on both sides.
Exactly. We are avoiding a third world war. That's exactly what we're doing. So, Gand, are you seeing from the people that you know, from your relatives, from the people you know in there, are you seeing or hearing of any signs that the IRGC, there's defections, demoralizations, turning on each other, or besiege? Do you feel, because I think that's what we really need in order for this to go the other way and to go in the right direction for people to be able to take over in Iran?
Yeah, so the people I know, they're not from Tehran, which is like most of them are not from Tehran. And okay, all the people I speak to are not from Tehran during these days, but like I think that we can see that the IRGC and the whole regime is cracking by actually threatening Europe and the whole Western world. When you see this regime that tries to be so diplomatic, and we saw them like a month ago going to Geneva with like suits and like ties and everything, you see how like they're just frightened. They're so scared for their they're not even legitimate anymore, but they're just scared for their whole idea and ideology, that they're just threatening all the world. And we can see that by their attacks on Cyprus and all the Gulf area. So this is the sign of them cracking up. And this is like my point of view, because ideology, and when you try to eliminate people always has a replacement.
Yeah,
always.
I agree with
But
you.
one identity doesn't have a replacement, and it's God. And when you're trying to fight their God, you know what I mean? It's just, this is what their ideology is. And I think that at one point people will understand that their God doesn't want them to. I mean, it's optimistic, but maybe they'll just understand that the God that people believe in, it's not like giving you the legitimate,
Yeah, they're not helping you win
or reason.
They're not
just
helping you win. Yeah, but the point is, Shoshana, I mean, with this ideology, they'll just go down with the ship, won't they? Talking of, I don't want to pardon the pun, what's going to happen with this 48-hour ultimatum by President Trump? What do you think is going to happen?
I think you're 100% right. When they have nothing left, like, they would rather die than surrender.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like Hitler in the bunker.
Yeah.
He's just going to do whatever he can do until he goes down with his ship. And this regime, which is obviously much larger than we, or at least I understood, the fact that they're able to function, even though the head of the snake is currently unavailable, unseen. We don't know how hurt he is, how hurt he isn't, if he's if he's actually alive or not. But they're still functioning. And to me, it's like death throes, right? Like when you're in a corner and you're dying and you've got nothing else to do, you're just going to throw out whatever you can. And so to me, it seems like that's what they're doing. And I don't know. I'm also on bated breath looking to see what's going to happen. I do think they'll back down. I mean, if you ask me, like, I really do think they'll back down, because Trump is not backing down. He's like really, really in this.
You don't want to play chicken with Trump, right, Emily?
No, definitely not. I mean, in regards to that 48-hour demand that we heard Trump make about the Strait of Hormuz and all of this issue, I think this actually brings up an interesting problem, a predicament for all of this war, and that is that Trump is threatening to target the power plants within Iran. Now, some of these power plants are very specifically tied to IRGC sites and supplying the electricity to some of those, elements within the country, but some of them are very much civilian, and to damage them would cause extensive damage to the Iranian people, which that happens in war sometimes. But the problem that arises here is that actually works to the military advantage of the regime itself, because when the Iranian people are suffering, that's better for them, because they'll say, oh, look what America is doing to you. We're the only ones defending you, which of course isn't true, but it will be used as a tool to rally domestic support. And so that's like an additional factor here, that the regime itself not only doesn't care about the Iranian people, but actually wants to see the Iranian people suffer more so that they can shore up support internally that they don't have right now. And so I think we need to think very carefully about how we approach some of those targets that we might ordinarily use when defeating an enemy like the Islamic Republic. It's a difficult situation, and I think that's all the more reason why we need to see international support of the U.S. operations in that Strait of Hormuz. It's their safety, it's their energy, even more so than it is the Americans. So definitely Europe and other states need to step up, need to help secure that so that we don't have to resort to things like that could harm the people, I think.
I completely agree. And I mean, it's very difficult. And like you say, but this is the Hamas playbook. This is the jihadi death cult playbook, that it is a strategy for their own people to die. It is a strategy for their own people to suffer. That's the whole thing. So it'll be very interesting to see. But, in terms of the other countries around the world, I mean, every single day is a new disappointment. And I think, please God, when we're the other side of this conflict, I think that President Trump and the people like us who were instrumental in bringing down the threat to civilization, well, there's going to be a lot of thoughts about what happens with NATO, what happens with these big international organizations that have proven completely useless. The majority of the budget of NATO comes from America. And I think Trump's going to turn around and go, well, you weren't there when I needed you. And so now cope with yourselves. And that's going to bring them a problem when Russia decides to do whatever it decides to do after this war. But on that note, even though Emily's on the border of Lebanon, we will continue with our very favorite segment, Scumbag of the Week. And Emily, let's go to you first before you are told to run off somewhere.
All right. Well, mine is actually very similar to where I'm standing right now. My scumbag of the week is Steve Sweeney, who's a reporter for RT, that is Russian state propagandist channel. Now, he has a video from this week inside of Lebanon, reporting from one of the areas that the IDF demanded be evacuated because they announced they were going to operate there. He ignored this warning. Take a look at what happened.
Further rocket attacks were reported against Nahariya and a
So as you can see, he was injured in this, not severely. He was lightly injured, but the point remains that he was standing in an area where he knew he wasn't supposed to be. And my favorite part about this is that after the fact, he posted on social media that Israel intentionally targeted him. Of course, the responses are thousands of replies being like, no one in Israel even knows who you are. I'd never heard of his name before this incident. So it's so funny that he's trying to make himself a martyr of this. And then he even denied that the IDF had called to evacuate that area. He tried to claim that there were no warnings about this. And then you go to his own social media and he posted a few days before how the IDF had warned to evacuate those areas. So obviously this guy is a liar, a complete charlatan when it comes to this conflict. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but in the tweet itself, instead of writing Israel, he wrote Israel with the, instead of an S, it's a $sign because, you know, the Zionist conspiracy is so evil. But the exaggeration on these people, I mean, it does such a public on this situation and this conflict. And it's just a shame because this is something that we see from a lot of media networks, of course, from networks like RT and Qatar state media, Al Jazeera, but others as well, even the US media regurgitating some of this nonsense. And it's frustrating because, you know, being here on the ground, there are soldiers whose lives have been at risk because of the steps that we have taken in order to ensure that civilians aren't being targeted, that civilians aren't being harmed, that journalists reporting inside of Lebanon aren't being harmed. So, Steve Sweeney, you are my scumbag of the week.
A very wealthy scumbag. And what a narcissist to say, oh, they're targeting me. That's like Emily, you saying, oh, IRGC knows I'm here. They're going to send a missile my way. Thank God we're not taping live.
That's actually more likely.
That is more likely, Emily. You are on their hit list. And thank God this isn't a live show. Okay. So, Gand, who's your scumbag of the week?
Oh, it was hard to choose. Really? Why? Why each time it gets harder and harder? So this week my scumbag is Francesca Albanese.
Oh, she's a regular
Repeat.
one.
Why? Okay.
Go on.
So today starts in Geneva her new report summit that's called Torture and Genocide. Well, I looked at the you can see it. I looked and it has like the whole thing, what they do each day, what they speak about, which room, and everything. None of it. Let's start with the thing that genocide, it's not the right word for what happened in Gaza. Never mind. Just leave it alone. Francesca Albanese, where are you, you human rights reporter at the UN? Where were you in January? Where are you now when people are in war and they're cut off of communication? This is a war, a real war crime. Trying to deny people from their own rights to be able to communicate with their relatives, with their people, to be able to tell outside of the world what's happening in Iran right now. Okay? And let me tell you that in Gaza, they had full communication to try to spread the whole propaganda everywhere. So please, the only place that has tortures and genocidal behaviors are in Iran, committed by the IRGC, who brought the people in Gaza to the same state. It's just the same link. So please, if you're a human rights activist and a reporter, do some research. Thank you. My drop. That's that's it.
Sagan, thank you for mentioning the special rapporteur for totalitarian, homophobic, misogynistic regimes. That should really be her title, because this woman, there is not one crazy totalitarian regime she does not speak in favor of. We've had her many, many times on the show, and thank you for bringing your perspective on it. Yes, a conference that talks about genocide and torture, but doesn't mention the main genociders and torturers of the world today. Thank you, Sogand. Okay, Shoshana, who's your scumbag this week?
I have international scumbags this week, unfortunately. So the first one is, his name is Gabriel Stan, and he's 39 years old, of Stony Point, New York. You could see in this video that he is a U.S. Postal Service worker. Like those little white trucks used to, like when I was a kid and I saw that truck coming, I was like, oh, the mail's here, because it was so exciting. And now to see it in the background of such an horrific anti-Semitic attack is very, very painful. He shoves a 4-year-old Hasidic boy in Muncie, New York, like shoves this kid. You can't even say there was a car coming and trying to help him. He just walks over to him and shoves him full force. The kid almost does a backflip on his own head, and he's being charged. But the state of what's happening around the world to Jews, and I want to say, as an Israeli who's going through a lot of what's happening, I want to give love to the Jews around the world, because not only are we seeing this, we're seeing synagogue attacks, but now just in Golders Green, which is a very, very Jewish religious neighborhood of London, 3 of their Hatzalah ambulances were set on fire and completely engulfed by arsonists. There's video of masked assailants. And it's like, at least here we know where our enemy fire is coming from. How do you know if your postal worker or the guy who's in the bread shop is going to come after you or your children? And that's a really, really scary place to be. So these are my scumbags of the week for terrifying their neighbors who just happen to be Jewish. It's a scary situation, and my heart goes out to the diaspora Jewish community, and to say to everyone, guys, like, this is not the way to go. This is not the way to go.
Well, this should not be tolerated. You're 100% correct. These people are disgusting scumbags. And what we don't talk enough about is the constant daily indoctrination that is happening in these countries, where 24/7, the media is telling people that the worst perpetrators of anything bad in the world are Jews. And so this is Goebbels in the 1930s Germany again. By the time they get to shove that little boy, that grown man shoving a little boy, by the time they get to that, they think they're justified. How did that happen? How did that happen? By you allowing hate marches to go on under your nose every single week.
You have the governor of New York, who actually had the chutzpah to come on a video and say she's going to be the Esther of the New York Jews.
Ugh. Esther didn't promote Haman, okay? And you promoted Mandani. That's the point. Unbelievable, really unbelievable. Oh, Lord, give us strength. So my scumbag of the week is this weasel called Joe Kent, who was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center from July 2025. He was a man who'd lost his wife in an ISIS attack in Syria, but somehow decided that he was going to come out and say that he's resigning because Israel drove America into this war. What is the real reason? What's really going on here? And this is what's really going on here. That a few months back, he was identified as somebody leaking information, classified information. He was just about to get fired, and he was just about to get investigated and possibly arrested. And so what does he do in Tucker Carlson fashion? He sorts himself out to come out and write this letter, which is bogus because it goes against everything he's been saying for the last few years. He's been talking about the Iranian threat. And so he comes out and does that. The next minute, he already has a podcast tour, starting with, of course, Tucker Carlson, who is going to give him an interview. And so this guy has just jumped on the train of the anti-Semites, blaming the Jews for everything. But the real reason is that he was under investigation for leaking classified information. So this is a way that he can become famous and rich on the way, hopefully, to jail. But the best is Donald Trump, who basically just did a very simple thing. He screenshot a tweet of Joe Kent saying, President Trump, deal with the Iranian regime's threat. And with that, he just finished him off in one fell swoop. And so, unfortunately, these scumbags are everywhere. They are traitors to their own country. And they are weasels and scumbags for doing what thousands of years of anti-Semitism has been doing and what causes rot in society. Blame the Jews, and that's one way. And so, Joe Kent, you are my scumbag of the week, and hopefully very soon, a scumbag behind bars. Amen. All right, and now for our heroes of the week. Okay, before you have to run off, Emily, who's your hero this week?
So my hero this week, I'll keep it brief because I do have to run, but hopefully not for a reason of a missile, but I do have to run. My heroes this week are the people of northern Israel, just simply because of their resoluteness, their resilience in the face of ongoing missile attacks and all of the violence that we've seen in the past 2+ years from Iran, from Lebanon, from seemingly every front they've been dealing with here. And despite that, they're still here, they're still standing strong, and they're determined to actually end this once and for all and get rid of Hezbollah and ensure that the beautiful north, the beautiful view that you see behind me here is secure. So they're my heroes of the week.
Amen. Heroes indeed. And stay safe, Emily. So, Shoshana, who's your hero this week?
Okay, my heroes are Mahmoud and Mamduk. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Two, I don't know if they're Arab Israelis or Palestinians. It's very difficult to understand exactly the nuances, but just because of the news report. But they apparently were under house arrest in Arad.
For what?
I don't know yet. The news report did not say. But in very Israeli fashion, they heard the boom in Arad, which was obviously a direct hit, and they left their house arrest and went and rescued Jewish women and children. And then they were hurt themselves, went to the hospital, and promptly went back to their house arrest. But the interview with them, I hope we can put English subtitles on it, is so beautiful because they're like, we were under house arrest, but we didn't care. We just ran and we saw people being hurt, and I took the babies from the mother and I ran out and then I went and helped the mother, and it's just like in their broken Hebrew. And it's just like, God, this is like the best of us, you know? And it's so wonderful to be able to say these are my heroes of the week who went and helped these Jewish mothers and children, even though in a certain way they could have gotten in a lot of trouble. I break surpassed them.
I love
For
it.
me, it's like,
I love
this
it.
is the humor I need. This is the unity.
Even our criminals have a good moral compass. That says everything. Even our criminals. That's wonderful, Shoshana. That's a great story. So, Gant, who's your hero this week?
I'm excited about it because it's my first time like naming a hero this way. My hero this week are the IDF Air Force. And it's not just because of us, because how they protect Israel and protect us with the Iron Dome and the Chetz and everything. It's because how they are fulfilling they are keeping the people of Iran safe. In each strike, they manage to do it as precise as possible to not harm Iranian civilians. And, the way that I speak with people and they just tell me, no, it's okay. They don't have anything to do with us. And I'm like, it's amazing because here I just hear a boom that can be from the Iron Dome and I will go crazy. Yesterday it was raining and the thunder just made me like have the PTSD, like going so scared. And they are in Iran and they're not scared of foreign Air Force above their heads. And it's just amazing. And thank you to the Air Force. And each person there who helps to free the world from this really, really painful regime.
Unbelievable. Our Air Force is really top Air Force in the world. Top Gun has nothing to do with
Khamsa.
with our wonderful men and women flying the skies of Iran. And I love it when Peter Hegseth said, the only thing Iranians see when they look up are the Stars and Stripes or the Star of David. I loved it. What a wonderful patriotic moment that was. They are heroes indeed. Thank you so much, Sogand. Now, my heroes are the Republic of Somaliland. Why? First of all, because they're a country that is going to be a very important strategic partner for Israel in the future. They are in a strategic location. They're in the gateway to critical trade routes. At the moment, we're all, huffing and puffing about the Strait of Hormuz, but they are a critical Red Sea, Suez Canal, Mediterranean trade route. We recognize them. They went against the very toxic and jihadi Somalia, which has caused so many problems, killed so many of its own people. They are really a strategic asset to us. They openly talk about how pro-Israel they are. They're all walking around with Israeli flags. But what really made me really admire them this week is that now they're trolling Ilhan Omar. They're talking about the fact that she is essentially the daughter of a Somali war criminal. Her real name, they went into the documents and they found that her real name wasn't Omar, it was Elmi, and that her brother and father used to flee, and that they're people who have committed war crimes in Somalia. And so I love the fact that they're not only blatantly pro-Israel, not only are they a beacon of Western values in the middle of this terrible, north of Somalia, but that they're trolling the people that troll us. So God bless Somaliland. We're very happy to be allies, and we see a very bright future together. So they're my heroes this week. And on that note, we pray that by next week we will have peace and quiet, that the IRGC will be taken down, and that the people of Iran will be free. And so we wish much safety, blessing to everyone on the right side of this conflict, and see you next week.
We're going to be joined now by Joseph Gittler. He is the founder of Leket Israel, which is the country's largest food rescue organization, which has shifted into emergency mode to ensure that vulnerable Israelis continue to receive food during rising tensions during the Iran war. And Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, the country is in emergency mode. It's at a standstill. What has Leket Israel's emergency response looked like on the ground since the Iran war began?
Well, unfortunately, because of the last few years, we have a playbook in place. So we've pivoted our operation once again. Our emergency is starting to feel like the normal, unfortunately. And so what we've been doing is using, of course, home front guidelines, which have forced us to cancel mass volunteering that we have usually on a daily basis. But our very brave team is out there doing what they can to rescue food as we normally do. But because things are very limited right now, the emergency plan calls for us to purchase meals and distribute them, especially to homebound elderly. And we are also sending thousands of digital cards to those in need where our partner NGOs are not operating normally. And so if they can't get them food, we have to find ways to get them food in other ways. And of course, keeping people safe at the same time, which makes things very, very tricky.
Joseph, let me ask you, are you seeing greater demand for assistance from families? And I would say especially seniors, people very difficult to get out of their houses in this situation as these tensions rise across Israel and we see these air sirens, air alerts taking place.
Sure. Unfortunately, every time there's an emergency, we see a peak, usually in the beginning. We're seeing it now. We're feeling it now. People are turning to us. People are calling our offices. And it's at the same time, and we have access to the least amount of food. So we are out there, especially, as you mentioned, with the elderly who really it's extra dangerous for them to leave their homes. We're making direct deliveries of cooked meals, of fruits and vegetables, of frozen soups to their homes to make sure that they can eat properly while not putting themselves at extra risk.
Right. And maybe talk about some of the logistical challenges Leket is facing. These are not normal situations. A lot of businesses are closed. A lot of transporters at a standstill here in Israel. What are the challenges you're facing now?
So it's a really tough challenge. What we're trying to do is find places where it's a little bit quieter so we can send our teams in to make sure that fruits and vegetables that are available to us are rescued and delivered. And people are willing. It's an amazing thing to see. We've seen this since the beginning of the war after October 7th. There are just people in the state of Israel, no matter what happens, they are willing to go out to help their neighbors in need. And we're seeing that again. People are disappointed when we tell them that we are not allowed to have volunteers in our distribution center and out in the fields. They actually don't care. They say, let us help. And so the spirit is strong despite the 2+ years of war. And we're confident we'll be able to take care of the people in need. And with the help and support of people, not just in Israel, but around the world, we'll be able to do what we need to do in this situation.
Now, as you're speaking, Joseph, we just showed it again. Maybe we can bring it up again. We have that QR code for those people that would want to contribute to Leket. And so let me ask you, what's your message to those people? There's the QR code. In these difficult, trying times, what message do you want to send to those donors and those volunteers who support Leket's mission and maybe some new ones that are going to be recruited here?
So first of all, we're going to do whatever it takes to help those people in need. I think most important now for those who are supporting us, we're sending digital credit cards to people by text message, by email, for those whose normal partners are not able to support them and can't bring them the food that we rescue. So we're just sending them cash so they can order food on their own. And so this is a large project in the millions of dollars, and whatever support people can provide for this would be very extra helpful in this dangerous time.
Worthy cause, and especially in these very difficult times. It's the Purim holiday, so I want to, Joseph, wish you a Purim Sameach, a happy Purim, and of course to all those wonderful people who donate and volunteer for Leket Israel in this special time. You know, Mishloach Manot, maybe that's a very special kind of food package. Maybe Leket can be give on this holiday. Thank you for joining us, Joseph Gidler.
Thank you again. Happy Purim to all.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kolel Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kolel Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help. And you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kolel Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. Step into the story of Israel's heartland with Blessed by Israel, where every purchase connects you to the land, the people, and the promise. Taste the sweetness of the promised land in their delicious honeys, or wear the story of the land close to your heart with the stunning Special Places of the Land necklace. Behind each product is a family, pioneers living in Judea and Samaria, crafting beauty and goodness from the soil of the Bible. When you buy their creations, you're not only receiving something extraordinary, you're investing in Israel's future, helping small businesses thrive and communities grow strong. Join a movement that celebrates faith, resilience, and hope. Visit blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL, that's BLESSISRAEL, at checkout for 10% off on your first order. Be part of strengthening Israel, one purchase at a time.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. I'm Caleb Ben David, coming to you live from Israel, bringing you all of the biggest headlines from across the region. Here are the latest developments. Well, it is day 26 of the war with Iran, and Operation Roaring Lion continues with Israeli airstrikes on Iranian missile launchers, on the targeted elimination of Iranian operatives, and the bombing of its weapon production sites. The IDF sent ongoing waves of airstrikes against the regime's ballistic missile program, aimed at reducing threats to Israel's home front. Over 600 strikes have hit Iran's missile infrastructure in recent days. Intelligence assessments report low morale, absenteeism, and wear and tear among Revolutionary Guard's missile units. Iranian operatives are said to be fearing for their safety and refusing to enter launch sites due to systematic targeted strikes. Now, in one of these strikes, the Israeli Air Force destroyed a loaded ballistic missile launcher ready to be fired at Israel. Footage released by the IDF shows the launcher neutralized, preventing an attack. Additional strikes have hit storage and other launch sites, including personnel across western Iran. And on the home front, a wave of Iranian airstrikes at Israel this morning, with air raid sirens ringing out 3 times in 1 hour across central Israel. One missile landed in an open area as Iran apparently tried to target the Hadera power station. No injuries or damages were reported in that strike. Meanwhile, the 27-year-old woman killed in a Hezbollah rocket attack on northern Israel yesterday has been identified as Nuriel Dubin. She was a youth counselor who was about to be married. She was fatally wounded by shrapnel on Road 90 after a barrage of around 30 rockets targeted the Rosh Pinah area. 2 others were lightly injured in that attack. MDA medics say they found her unconscious with severe injuries, were forced to declare her dead at the scene. May her memory be a blessing. Separately, an Iranian missile impact in Sfat lightly wounded 2 people from glass shards. In central Israel last night, 9 people were wounded in Bnei Brak, including a 23-year-old man in moderate condition. Others, including children and elderly women, were lightly injured by blast or shrapnel. Additional impacts reported in Petah Tikva, Givat Shmuel, Rosh Ayin, causing some damage but no further injuries. Well, standing by in Tel Aviv with the latest on the home front is our ILTV reporter, Devo Klein. Devo?
Hey, Kalev. I'm standing here at Culture Square in the heart of Tel Aviv. There's quite a few people around, walking around. Of course, everybody is on high alert in case there is a siren. There are a few places here to shelter, and people are on high alert. And, of course, listening to the Home Front Command guidelines. Now, this is nothing compared to the scenes from this morning. The Islamic regime firing back-to-back missiles, sending thousands into bomb shelters earlier this morning. Now, that's calmed down ever since. There are still people walking around. But the target from that morning, Islamic regime was targeting an energy infrastructure belonging to the Israel Electrical Company. There actually have been videos resurfacing of large plumes of smoke. But what I can tell you right now and confirm to you, the Israel Electrical Company has confirmed that no damage or harm was caused to this critical energy infrastructure in northern Israel, and that these videos of these big plumes of smoke are actually coming from a fall in an open area. So what is happening is that, well, supposedly the IDF is kind of prioritizing which ballistic missiles they choose to intercept using Israeli air defense. Obviously, Israeli air defense is limited. It's not, unlimited and you shoot down whatever you can. And the priority right now is civilian infrastructure. So if they see a missile heading toward an open field, they will just let it fall. Of course, this is all being monitored very carefully to make sure that nobody is in the area. And I can definitely tell you, Kalev, that this last barrage that we've seen from this morning, there have been no casualties and no serious damages reported. Now, what's really interesting, Kalev, is that all the fatalities that we've had over recent days have actually come from Hezbollah rocket fire shooting at northern Israel from inside southern Lebanon. Why is this interesting? The rockets coming from Hezbollah are significantly less sophisticated than these splitting warheads coming from the Islamic regime in Iran, but they're actually able to cause more damages and, more significantly, more fatalities. An elderly man in Miskavam and a 27-year-old woman. May both of their memories be a blessing. But here in central Israel, in Tel Aviv, we have nothing to report on damages, severe damages, and of course, no fatalities. We hope that it stays that way, but we will, of course, be on high alert and be listening to the Home Front Command guidelines because they do save lives. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Devo. I should mention all of those videos of that impact site near Hedera were cleared by the IDF military censor. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says Iran has offered a, quote, very significant prize to the U.S. related to oil, gas, and the Strait of Hormuz, and says a resolution to the war could be possible. Trump claims the U.S. and Iran have held productive talks on a complete end to hostilities. These negotiations involving his envoy, Steve Witkoff, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and other officials. Now, his administration has submitted a 15-point peace plan to the Iranians, which includes an end to their nuclear weapon and enrichment programs, among other conditions. Now, some U.S. strikes on Iranian targets, including those at power stations, have been postponed to at least this Friday as negotiations continue. Trump said talks have gone perfectly, but warned that if negotiations fail, military action will continue. Here's some of what Trump had to say last night.
If we can end this without more lives being down, without knocking out $10 billion electric plants that are brand new, but they can't have certain things. I mean, you know the things. I don't have to go over the list, but again, it starts with no nuclear weapons, and they've agreed to that. There won't be any nuclear weapons. They're not going to have, and they're not going to have enrichment, any of those things. But look, I hate to say that we're in a very good bargaining position, and I hate to say that they're defenseless because, until that last missile is fired, they have little power. But we are in about the best bargaining position.
For their part, Iranian officials continue to deny the existence of peace talks with the U.S. Iran's Press TV today cited a senior regime official rejecting the Trump proposal and saying it's the U.S. that must accept Iranian conditions, including war reparations and recognition of Tehran's authority over the Strait of Hormuz. An Iranian military spokesperson said to camera that the U.S. is, quote, negotiating with itself and that pre-war energy prices will not return until Washington accepts that regional stability is guaranteed by Iranian forces. He also at one point addressed Trump directly, mocking the president with a familiar catchphrase from Trump's old TV show, The Apprentice.
Hey, Trump, you are fired. You are familiar with this sentence. Thank you for your attention to this matter. The central headquarters of خاتم الانبیا. سطح خود درگیری هایتان به مرحله مذاکره خودتان با خودتان رسیده؟ نه خبری از سرمایه گذاری هایتان در منطقه خواهد بود و نه قیمت سابق انرژی و نفت را خواهید دید تا وقتی که بفهمید ثبات در منطقه توسط دست قدرتمند نیروهای مسلح ما تضمین می شود. ثبات از طریق قدرت. صراحتاً اعلام می کنیم تا موعدی که اراده ما نباشد هیچ وضعیتی به روال سابق بر نمیگردد. این اراده زمانی ایجاد می شود که به طور کامل فکر اقدام علیه ملت ایران از اذهان کثیف شما پاک شود.
Turning now to the northern front, where the IDF is moving to gain effective control of South Lebanon up to the Litani River. Overnight, the IDF struck key crossings used by Hezbollah to move weapons and operatives to the south. Now, under the 36th Division, Golani forces continue targeted ground operations to expand the forward security zone. Troops killed at least 8 terrorists in close combat, including a Radwan Force sniper, and destroyed an underground shaft used for staging and weapon storage. Dozens of rockets, rifles, machine guns, and grenades were destroyed in these operations. The Israel Air Force also struck fuel stations linked to Hezbollah's Al-Amana network, which is a key source of funding and logistics for his force, intelligence units, and infrastructure operating from a radio station. Now, France is urging Israel to refrain from expanding ground operations, warning this could have major humanitarian consequences. The French foreign minister also praised Lebanon for expelling Iran's ambassador, and he accused Hezbollah of dragging the country into a new conflict. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, insisted that Israel will take control of Israel's in southern Lebanon as part of its ongoing security efforts. Well, joining us now for more is Reserves IDF Brigadier General and former Air Force Base Commander Israel Relik Shafir. And also we have with us Tamar Gindin, an Iran expert at Haifa University's Esri Center. Thank you for joining us. Tamar, let me just start with you. President Trump, as usual, sounding optimistic, positive, talks are constructive, they're going well. We're talking with senior officials. Meanwhile, you see Iran denying this, rejecting U.S. proposals, even making fun or mocking President Trump. I mean, what is going on the Iranian side here? Is there any truth to what Trump is saying, you think?
Meanwhile, I also see Iranians getting text messages saying donate here for the Kill Trump campaign, for a prize on Trump's head. And every time in the past when he talked about good negotiations, what we saw at the end was the 12-day war and now the Epic Fury war. So I'm not sure how good it is. And who is he talking to? When he just declared that they're having negotiations, first of all, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs denied it. Then the IRGC denied it. Then he said he was talking with Mohammad Baqir Qalibaf, who's the head of the Speaker of Parliament. But I don't know who gave Qalibaf the mandate. Qalibaf also denied it. But we don't know what mandate he has. We don't know what control he has. When the president, who's according to the Iranian constitution, the number one person between leaders, when he was the number one person and said, "We're sorry for bombing our neighbors, we won't do it again," a few hours later, the IRGC bombed the neighbors and published on their Telegram channel that the president is not in charge now, we're at war, we're in charge. So I don't know who he's talking to. I don't know what mandate whoever he's talking to has. They obviously don't have mandate from the people, but we also don't understand exactly what's the structure, if any, of the power mechanism right now, and who's in charge, who's in control of which powers. I don't even know if Colonel Vahidi, General Vahidi, the present commander of the IRGC, is in charge of his own soldiers. It looks like a guerrilla war or militias more than something organized right now.
Right. And, Relik, as Tamar's noted, often at the end of these talks or claims of talks, there is U.S. military action. And there are those who actually say that this could be a ploy from Trump in order to just build up the forces, for example, sending a couple of thousand of paratroopers to the region for possible military action, that he's just really sort of playing for time until the U.S. is ready to strike. If that it would be the case, what kind of further military action could we potentially see beyond these airstrikes, especially with the presence now in the region of forces like U.S. Marines and now paratroops?
I hope it won't be attacks against infrastructure that could serve Iran in the day after. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi also asked Trump not to bomb or not to hurt infrastructure that could serve for the day after, because after this war there will be some rebuilding, hopefully one that the Iranian people would want. And if you listen to what they shout in the streets, to the slogans,
Right.
to the one they obey, it's their crown prince. Even if Trump decides to install Ghalibaf as leader, I don't think he'll have enough support from within, and maybe the Iranian people would rise up anyway. But I do hope it won't be against infrastructure, but maybe against more military or IRGC or the whatever is left of the regime. What the Iranians want is now to go for the reformists.
Right. Well, tomorrow actually I had to ask that question of Relic Shafir, but I'm glad you spoke out because now we know your view. So I want to ask Relic to answer the question and maybe see if he agrees with you. I just do want to note, though, there was a clear Iranian attempted attack on Israel's infrastructure today at the Hadera power station, even while the U.S. is saying it suspended its attacks against power stations in Iran. Relic, now it's your go.
Okay, I think that Trump is talking to the U.S. citizens and perhaps to the Europeans, trying to show that he's taking a track that has diplomacy in it and has some kind of an appeasement plan and the day after plan. This is the Kissinger approach that we remember from the 1970s with Vietnam, which is speak softly maybe and use the big stick. Actually, this is a saying, I think, by President Teddy Roosevelt in 1906. So after he did say this and gave the Iranians a chance to come to terms, I think he will take out a power station, probably either in Iran, in Tehran or Isfahan, to darken the city and as a show to the Iranian people and the IRGC that he means business, because some of the news of what goes on in the field doesn't always get up to the commanders. The Iranians are not known for telling the truth to their commanders. That has been a case, we saw that in many ways, and if somebody's interested in getting into the mind, you should read Not Without My Daughter, which is a famous book that describes the Iranian society. I think the problem is with the Hormuz Straits and the mines that were set in the plan, the Iranian plan, which has been known to stop all traffic at the Hormuz Strait. That is the crux of the problem that's driving the prices up. So the way to neutralize this is very difficult, but it starts off with the coast missile program that shoots missiles, land to sea missiles, radars, etc. That could be taken out through the Air Force. There is one point in the Straits, which is a very narrow place near Bandar Abbas, that may require ground troops, but I don't think the United States is planning on ground troops anything but maybe taking the Harj Island as a bargaining chip with Iran. So I think there are some more targets to play with. Power station, the Harj Island, and continued dismantlement of the Iranian forces, both the missile program, the missiles themselves that have moved further east in order to try to save them, and continued pressure until the Iranians cave in. The problem that Trump has is with oil prices at this time and a release of more oil from the reserves is probably the game changer that will drive the prices down. But the Iranians are not ready to negotiate. And let me conclude this part of the conversation by saying that if we want to get into the Iranians' mindset, I think we should concentrate on October 2nd, 680, which is about 1400 years ago, at the Battle of Karbala. Everything about the Shia has to do with the victimhood created at that battle and the way it's carried out by the people who are leading Iran, who are Messianic and think that God is with them, and their suffering is part of their nature and culture. So we're not in for a quick cave in of the Iranians.
All right. Well, let me get Tamar's response to that. And also just obviously their Relic feels stronger action even against infrastructure has to be taken before the Iranians or the regime is ready to make any kind of compromises. But of course, I mean, the key with whoever's in charge, Tamar, the key still is going to remain. The bottom line demand, certainly for the U.S. and Israel, is the nuclear program, the willingness of Iran to forego not just nuclear weapons, but any enrichment and the enriched material. I mean, is there any way any of these regime officials, anyone who's left, is going to be willing to make that kind of concession, especially at this point or even at a future point?
I think that the main difference between your viewpoint and mine, or the West and me as the representative of the Iranian people, is that they don't want this regime. It doesn't matter who of the regime and what they're willing to compromise for. Leaving this regime in power, even if it's even more so, if it's a weak, humiliated regime, that's even worse. You know, mostly dead is slightly alive. And even after the 12-day war, we saw that a weak, humiliated regime took it out on the people. On one hand, we saw that they were more lenient with hijab and fun on the streets and concerts, but executions were on the rise. In 2024, there were more than 900 executions, and the world was in shock for 2 days. In 2025, we passed the 1,000 in September, and we finished 2025 with more than 2,000 executions. And that's besides what we saw in the beginning of 2026, when it wasn't even a legal process of executions, with tens of thousands of people killed. I don't think that the Iranian people, that's also what they say. Did we go to the streets and get killed in tens of thousands after Trump promised to get in the moment they start killing protesters, and then said help is on the way? Did we do this for a better nuclear deal for you? What they want is not. It's not negotiations with the current regime.
Tamar, I understand, and I think on a moral level, we all would agree with you, Relic, and me, and everybody, anyone in the civilized world, let's say. But President Trump seems to have moved on from the notion of changing the regime. In fact, he even said in that same sort of press briefing that we showed, that has already been regime change of sorts in Iran, which sounds like he's prepared to live with what's left of the current regime.
Yeah, Trump. The problem with relying on what Trump says is that he says one thing and then the opposite and then another
Fair
thing,
enough.
like a few times a day. So he should be judged by his actions, which still remain to be seen. It is a great concern among the Iranian people that he will leave them with the same regime but weaker. But it is an opportunity right now because we really don't know who's left of the regime. Mojtaba Khamenei is the hidden leader. Okay, like they have the hidden imam in the Shia. Now they have the hidden leader. Nobody has seen him. He does have an active X account. His inauguration was carried out with a picture with flowers. So now all the Iranians, they have like a carton Mojtaba with flowers in his turban. It's like a trend on social media. So Mojtaba is like a ghost. We don't know who's really running the country. We're not even sure if the country is being run. So I think it will be missing a great opportunity if we don't use it. I'm not saying that it will be used. I don't know what Trump is going to do. I can quote Trump himself, okay, on his actions. He said, I think it was during the 12-day war, he said, nobody knows what I'm going to do. Even I don't know what I'm going to do. So
Right, fair
because
enough.
the fate of this whole region depends on a person who's very unpredictable, and even he can't predict what he's going to do. What I can do is represent the sentiment in the
Right.
Iranian street.
All right. Well, Mushtaba may be resting under some flowers at this point. Ralik, I want to give you a chance. First, I want to respond to what Tamar said, but I also want to move a little to the northern front because things are heating up there. Israel is insisting this has now become its own separate conflict. But how realistic is that if they're, in fact, they're moving towards some kind of resolution or even ceasefire in the Iran war? Can Israel maintain its offensive against Hezbollah, and what ultimately has to be its goal there? What militarily can it do to achieve its sort of policy end of seeing Hezbollah dismantled and disarmed?
About the North, I think if we could sequence the events, we would hold it and do something midway in Lebanon, because Lebanon in the post-Iran war era is a different Lebanon, because Hezbollah will not have the support of Iran, may meet the Syrians who are looking for revenge, and maybe the Syrians will be willing to pay by attacking Hezbollah at the Bekaa Valley as a return favor to Israel conceding some posts in the Golan Heights, in the Syrian Golan Heights, meaning the enemy of my enemy is my friend in this case, and also appeasing the U.S. So we're not going to go into full strength, I think, in Lebanon, and maybe wait out a little so that that they feel the wrath of what's coming in the post-Iran era. And that is some kind of a collusion with the Lebanese government. So I think our strategy in Lebanon, not full power, but try and push Hezbollah beyond the point where they can send direct missiles at Israeli communities, especially Metula and Kiryat Shmone. So that's on the northern front. Going back to Iran, I'm not an expert on this, but I've read enough and understood enough so that the Iran may not have leadership at the time. That is one leader, but the IRGC are actually the strong, I would say, group in Iran, and they may go down to the last man. I'll just remind these kind of regimes. Let's go back to Germany, 1945. They did not collapse until they were completely taken over. Let's remember Vietnam. They did not collapse under no circumstances, including the Tet Offensive, which was devastating to them. So we're talking about looking at a different type of culture, a different kind of mentality, which for Western people is very difficult to understand. Honor and the belief that God is with them is what leads them. And they have about 3 million people with weapons that can stop any uprising. By the way, in the previous uprising, most of the killing was done by Afghan troops or Afghan parts of the IRGC and Basij, who shot at the people. So they are pretty ready to any onslaught by people who are not well armed. So I'm not optimistic at all that change will take over in Iran. It might go into some kind of a disarray, but not the IRGC. They will continue to fire to the last day. When will the last day be? 1988. Khomeini had to send children to blow up landmines because they ran out of soldiers, they ran out of munitions, and only then did they capitulate and go into a ceasefire. So that is an example of the strength that they feel they have, and they will hold to the last moment.
All right. Well, I'm sure Tamar has some response to that, but I am afraid we are out of time, so we'll have to hear perhaps that on another occasion.
One sentence?
One sentence.
The enemy of the Islamic Republic is the Iranian people, and they have the same mentality. So it's going to be an interesting battle.
All right. Well, with an interesting point, which we will have to end on that. Tamar Gindin and Israel Relic Shafir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates on Israel on all your devices, follow our ILTV channels. Keep up with us on our social media. You can also catch us on Screen-IL with 24/7 live coverage.
The Army's keyword, I think, is bureaucracy, like any organization. And the war's keyword is right now. If you need something now, maybe in 30 minutes, they'll be too late. So they were there to get them extension cords for electricity. They were there to get them, God forbid, blankets and sheets because Zaka didn't have enough body bags.
The Nosh with your host, Kosher Guru, here on ILTV. Boom shakalaka. We have an amazing episode for you today as we talk to Dror Chilbelsi from Shuva Aim, all the way from the spot where you want to go volunteer and say thank you to our soldiers and what he created. We're going to hear from Dror today. Dror, welcome to the Nosh.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing amazing. Thank God. How are you?
Good to see you.
Dror, let me ask you a question. You grew up here in Israel. You are doing so much chesed. We're going to go into and discuss how you started and what you are doing and continue to do on a daily basis. Did you ever think you would be doing what you're doing now growing up?
Honestly, it was a big part of my life always. I don't feel like I do something that I have never been before. I never did before.
Explain to me, growing up, what did you do to give back? What did you do to do some chesed, some kindness in your community?
I'll start with just being my mom and my dad's kid. Really, for them, ever since I know myself, it was even if you won't get good grades in school, okay, don't study, I don't care, but be a good person. When you see someone needs something, help him. When your house will be the house of Avraham Avinu, because Grandpa's house was the house of Avraham Avinu, and my mom's house is the house of Avraham Avinu. So she's always, and your house will be the house of Avraham Avinu.
Okay, talking about the house of Avraham Avinu and doing chesed, it's an unfortunate thing, but so many of us continue to talk about it today and have to talk about it because the world must know the truth. October 7th changed your life. Of course, it changed so many lives around Israel and the world, but October 7th changed your life. Where were you on October 7th and 8th, and what did you start doing and where?
So, I was in Nativot, okay, spent Shabbat with my family. Nativot is in the south. Actually, a Shabbat that I had a girlfriend back there, and we decided to keep that Shabbat. I wasn't keeping Shabbat before. I was actually big on the nightlife scene in Israel. I've been to a few Nova festivals before, and that Shabbat we came back from Sinai, from Egypt. She said, "Let's keep Shabbat." I said, "Yeah, why not?" We already stopped smoking on Shabbat, and it was a nice progress. And 6:20 a.m. sirens and booms, and everything gets crazy, and you open up your phone because something is clearly not usual. And then you open the TV and you really understand what's happening. I had a lot of friends in the Nova Festival, started getting messages and locations. We have a sister that lives in Kfar Aza, that it was, we tried to aim some troops towards their house to help them. That's how it really started for me, or for us as a family, to see what we can do and how we can help. At the same time, my brother Kobe, who lives in Shuva, in Moshav Shuva, it's in Otef, understood somehow that the junction is turning slowly to a field hospital. That was the only safe junction. You can land a helicopter or stop the ambulances in order to evacuate the wounded from 232 to that junction, Shuva's junction. And from there to do all the triage and send them to the hospitals. Kobe ran to the junction with his friends, with a folding table, with some food and drinks. And then it's really starting.
That's when it really started. But just you mentioned your sister who lived in Kfar Aza. How is your sister? Did anything happen?
We'll give a nice closure to this. Thanks God, Sunday around 12 p.m., they released her from her house. They were fighting over the door with the terrorists. Her son, the terrorists shut the door.
Oh, wow.
The bullet hit her son Iftach's hand, but also broke the handle. And then they couldn't fight over the handle anymore, the terrorists. And they just left the house for some reason. They didn't burn it like they did to most of the houses the people fought. They didn't burn the house. And thanks God, they saved Sigal Yacobi, Sigal and Ronen.
Okay, so thank God they're okay.
Thank God they're...
Just want to make sure because I did not know that part of the story. So now let's go back to the Shuva Junction.
Now,
this is your cousin now?
My brother Kobe.
Your brother Kobe set up a table.
Set up a table with his friends, 2 of them doctors. They came to help the medical team. More people came with this guy brought some chairs. This one got some little bit of food. But then it's really starting to be there to help now. You know, in the army's keyword, I think, is bureaucracy, like any organization. And the war's keyword is right now. If you need something now, maybe in 30 minutes, they'll be too late. So they were there to get them extension cords for electricity. They were there to get them, God forbid, blankets and sheets because Zaka didn't have enough body bags. Sunday, we understood Kobe, even the end of Shabbat, but Sunday we understood he's still there. And he tells us the soldiers coming with a small backpack with 2 shirts, 2 underwear. They don't really know what's happening in the area. And then we joined. Me with 2 friends and with my brother Ariel going to stores in Netivot. If it's to buy shirts and underwears and towels and grocery shopping, to throw a quick shakshuka or a sandwich. My brother Eliran in Ramat Gan is doing all the shopping from suppliers. More shirts, more stuff. We tell them what we need. Every day he drives down from Ramat Gan to Netivot.
So in the beginning, when you and your brothers are now going to the stores, you're trying to buy clothing, you're trying to make shakshuka, which you need to buy ingredients, tomatoes and other things to make the shakshuka. Who's paying for all this? How are you affording this in the beginning?
We're doing it 100% from us. That's how we started. No one thought of people that'll come to Israel to volunteer or to donate or stuff like that. You couldn't fly to Israel at the start of the war. So we just started. Thanks God. I don't know, I have my own Instagram, and I know social media is a part of my life. So somehow you start posting and you start asking people, maybe people want to help. So you do Beat and Pay Box. It's like Zelle and Cash App. And it grows every day. First, the numbers of the soldiers are growing. Road 25, the road we're on, it was the only entrance to Otef Aza for over a month. For, let's say, a month before they... because they blocked all the other roads right on October 7th. You couldn't find in the area, not even a gas station. Because of the rockets, they empty all the gas stations, so they won't explode, and they close the stores. You cannot even have coffee. Shuva's Junction, our place, became the only spot to have a cup of coffee, to eat something, to grab a snack. It took the army long time to provide the first war meal. Okay, over a month.
We have to just take a step back to understand. Everybody out watching the show has to understand that Shuva Aim has turned in today an amazing opportunity, but not only opportunity, an amazing place where Doron and his brothers have built an entire area. It's almost like a respite center where you could come and get food, drink, clothing, just chill and relax. I want Jordan to go into it a little bit more because you're like telling us October 8th, just a table, and now you're saying everything else going on over there.
Yeah.
You have to tell us how you started from the table and how you progressed and built it out over time.
So first, when there's the need for us, Israelis, Jews, when we see a need, we jump on it. Okay, it's a part of our life. It's this survival instinct. Now imagine the first day you have 500 soldiers coming. So you understand, okay, it's not just that table with coffee. We cannot stay at just this table with coffee. So you add more food. Then another day passes and you see more soldiers coming and the guys don't have uniforms. The real regular uniforms before the tactical uniforms, before all this. And then a logistic guy from the army see that I reach a lot of soldiers every day. So the guy literally dropped me 40 pairs of uniforms, 40 pair of shoes, and tell me, if you give one to a soldier, you take the old one and I'll come and I'll change it for you. And then the next day, the IDF spokesperson, let's say, they started coming maybe 2 weeks into the war. I think that's how I met you. They started coming to the OTF with, celebrities, people from the States, people from, all governments, and they understood that Shuva can be a nice spot for them to have a coffee with them before they go into.
And you're not a government entity. You're not part of the government.
We're nothing.
You're not even like an organization at this point. You're not even a corporation. You're just brothers doing this out of your car and on the side of the road.
Exactly. And I'll tell you more than that. That's what it is until today. Until today, Shuva Aim is not an organization. It's not an NGO. We're not a government thing. We're not funded by no one. We're funded by Am Yisrael. We're a play where I call it the Am Yisrael project. Okay, because Am Yisrael from all over the world found a spot that they can, first when you walk in, you know it, you recharge with so much good energy, because everyone that there are people that are coming to help. No one is coming to, even soldiers, when they come to take from you a towel or a shirt or an underwear, you feel like a little girl, and you're like, they give you so much just by asking you something. And you said an opportunity. I tell you what, I don't find it. Yes, we already had few, I think dozens of thousands of volunteers from all over the world. It's one of the biggest volunteer opportunities in the area. But it's not, people need to understand that we're a place that do it, that needs help. I don't like to call it volunteer opportunity. Like organizations that they making jobs for volunteers. You can come anytime. People coming anytime. They don't need to let me know. Just show up. You'll find what to do. It's like your home when you get there.
Are you still doing with your brothers, or who's involved with you in this organization? I'm going to call it an organization, or this project, we'll call it. Who's involved on the day-to-day operation of setting up and working 24/7 to make sure that this project exists and keeps going?
So for months, for over a year, it was literally 3 of us every day coming. Two of my brothers, Kobe and Eliran. Kobe's also have his business, also 5 kids, and he's doing Kitat Kohenut, first responders unit of Shuva. Eliran have his 5 kids, have his business, lives in Ramat Gan, gave up everything to come down every day.
When you say they both have a business, what do each one of your brothers do?
Kobe is doing woodwork with kids, with elders. Sadnaot, I don't know how to say, like
woodworking.
Courses. Yeah.
Great.
It's a lot of empowerment for every age. It's very Jewish. He speaks a lot about the connection to God. Eliran is doing real estate in Georgia, the country.
Oh wow!
So imagine, and he have an office, and every day of closing it and coming down to the south was insane, even for him, on his job side. So thanks God, after a year and a little bit, they managed slowly to go back to their job. Eliran is still taking care of the money for us, paying suppliers. Okay, we work like a business today. People coming there and like, oh my God, is it all donations? And it sounds like, because people remember that they used to send stuff from America or collect stuff in South Africa and send it to Israel. Today is a bit different. We have suppliers for everything that in the place, from shirts and underwears and towels and face masks and tactical gloves that the warriors
So are these
need.
suppliers giving it to you for free, or you're paying for it?
No one is giving us nothing for free. I can tell about our suppliers that each one of them is like a co-worker, is like a partner with us, because we really get the best prices. We buy an underwear for 4 shekels.
Oh,
That's
wow.
$1.20, and we'll buy a dry fit shirt for 7 shekels. But people donating money, and we buy stuff with it, meat and chicken and fish. Okay, you spoke a little bit about today, but today Shuva Aim is a refreshment stop, is an oasis, 10 minutes away from the border with Gaza. They feed over 1,000 soldiers every day. That more than feeding, like I said, give them equipment. We have a whole free store in the place. And it's also a place for their soul. When you come out of Gaza, the first step you do is to Shuva. You fill yourself with good energy, with people's energy. You get to speak English. That's a big thing about Shuva Aim. They have jokes about it in the army. That, oh, you know where I got my English from? From Shuva.
So you have so many soldiers coming by literally all day, all night. I've gone there 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You have so many soldiers, and I see them pulling up, whether it's in their personal cars, their Hummers, other tactical vehicles. You must have so many stories of people who have been helped, who have just relaxed and chilled at Shuva. Can you share 1 or 2, maybe 3 stories that soldiers have told you how Shuva has changed their lives, how it helped them, how it showed that all these volunteers coming from around the world are coming to volunteer to help to feed them, just to say thank you, to show love? What is that? What do these soldiers feel? What do they share with you?
I'll tell you, I just thought about it a second before you asked. One of the things that I really, I can say I'm proud about, there is a unit called Yassar. Yassar are the ones, they are the kind of the army's Zaka, but each one of them is a fighter, and they go into Gaza to rescue, let's say the tank who just exploded a few days ago. They're the ones that are being sent to the tank to get the bodies out. It's I believe it's the hardest job in the army today, to pick up your brothers and just to make sure they're coming for a proper burial in Israel. And these guys, right that day, right that morning when it happened, the first place they came when they finished with the tank, they walked into Shuva. You could see them with the dust on their face, but they're walking in after this thing, okay, cleaning a tank with 4 bodies, to walk into Shuva with a smile. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know what we did to have this right or honor to be this place for this type of people. That when they finish such an incredible job, such a hard job, we will be the place that give them the first smile, or they give them the sense of, grounding them for a second. So that's definitely one. 2 will be not about soldiers. Okay, that'll be, I told you about this, the house of Avraham Avinu. My mom taught us that it doesn't matter who, what's his name, color, religion. It doesn't matter. If someone comes to you, you let him in. It doesn't matter where you are.
That's the way of our people. That's
how
we're
do
raised.
It. That's how we do it. And it happens many times. The car stopping next to Shuva, it looks very pretty from the outside. Wood and trees and decks and and soldiers and cars. And then a car stops with 3 ladies inside, and they ask me, "Is that a restaurant?" And I'm like, "Yeah, come in." And then they're really coming off the car. A mother, her young daughter, and another friend of them. And I offer them coffee, and then my famous bun with fish balls. And they eat with me, they sit down, and then the mother, all of a sudden was like, "Oh, she's been to Gaza." She said about the daughter. And I'm like, my first reaction was, look, all the soldiers telling me to come with them to Gaza, but I don't want to. I'm a little bit scared. I think what I do is important. And I asked the daughter, what you did to Gaza? What you did over there? And she looks at the mother, and the mother answered, she was a hostage. Oh. And I'm saying, what? And the daughter is saying, she was also aiming the mother. And apparently these were Raya and Ila Oren from Barry. They released at the first deal. And since then, they already came to volunteer in Shuva 3 times.
But the first time they came, they thought you were just a
They
restaurant.
thought it's a restaurant. They already came to volunteer at our place now 3 times, understanding what it is.
So you really are you have the spectrum. You have the volunteers, but you have one of the reasons why our soldiers are in Gaza fighting to get our hostages, to release the hostages. And here you have from the first deal a mother and daughter hostage coming back to help say thank you to the soldiers by feeding them. Dora, that is so special on so many levels.
You know,
it's like full circle.
And I'll add to you, parents of fallen soldiers, parents of fallen guys from the Nova Festival, that somehow finding Shuva as the place whenever they come to the south to go visit the Nova side or something like that, or to go see the Tatzpitaniot, the Observers Memorial. They will stop in Shuva for a second. They'll come say hi. Because they already been welcomed once there, and it's the only positive place in the Otef today.
Draw me a picture of Shuva right now. Explain to the people, because I've been there and I physically have volunteered and been there. You have, we'll start, I guess, in the kitchen, that you built out an entire kitchen area. Then you have, we'll call like the buffet area. Like when you go to a hotel, you walk the buffet line where you have coffee. Yes, you have the coffee machine, everything else. Then you have the little buffet area where people get hot food. And then you have this whole deck area. Like, who built this deck area? Really? We have tables and a hammock, and you have guitars or sheshbesh, backgammon, and books that people read and enjoy.
Behind the wall is a store.
Walk me through the setup today.
So, even first, you said it all. So we will just add people. They can look up Shuva Brothers on either Google or Instagram to really see it.
If you're going to tell them to look it up, if you have a website or some site, if people want to volunteer or donate or help you out, what type of donations do you need? If you're going to give that to us, tell us how to get involved as well.
So really, that's what it is. If you guys coming to Israel, please come volunteer. Look us up, text. I am the one that doing the social media. I'm the one that replying your Instagram, your Facebook. Very easy. If you cannot come, share it with someone. Let's make people that are in Israel to know about it and to come volunteer with us. If you cannot do both, or if you just want to help us financially to